Chapter 467. Hathaway put down the silver-white carving knife and stretched her body. Her voluptuous breasts outlined an amazing curve. More than half of the clay golem production line had been completed. Only the rune engraving equipment had not been completed yet. This equipment required a tower genie construct made from a legendary soul crystal to operate, but it would be a waste if it was only used to produce clay golems, so Sulen planned to input the stone golem's rune engraving technology into it as well. When the time came, as long as the other equipment caught up, this equipment could be used to produce stone golems. In addition to the legendary tower genie, this machine also required a lot of rare materials. Sulen and Hathaway spent a lot of effort and finally made this equipment. Finally, they just had to install the tower genie construct and it was done. Hathaway picked up her magic staff and quickly chanted an obscure spell. The surrounding elemental energy began to fluctuate violently. Soon, a dazzling light appeared, and a powerful elemental wave descended. Legendary activated life construct. Strange elemental energy quickly gushed out from Hathaway's body, and a powerful mana instantly shrouded the legendary soul crystal in front of her. Soon, another wave of energy appeared in the room. Soul Weave. Supreme magic skills plus mana shaping plus soul construct. Traces of soul power quickly changed under Hathaway's manipulation. Soul Weave was a very difficult spell, and it was a very crucial part of making a legendary tower genie. It was equivalent to building a personality for the tower genie, building a framework, and making the tower genie according to one's ideas. Normally, the tower genies made by wizards were extremely calm and rational, but this did not stop some people from making a silly tower genie. Hathaway, who had experience in making the tower genie, was very fast this time. After about 10 minutes, a rune was completed. With a flash of light, the construction of the legendary tower genie was completed. The next step was to install the legendary tower spirit construct and the rune inscription device together. This was not a difficult task. After placing the legendary tower spirit in the heart of the device, the automatic rune inscription device was considered complete. Automatic Rune Inscriber, Legendary Rune. Can inscribe runes on objects according to requirements. Accuracy plus 25, Efficiency plus 35, Indestructibility plus 30, Logic plus 32, Failure Reduction plus 33. After seeing the attributes of the Mageweth Inscriber, Sulen nodded with satisfaction. With this thing, his clay golem production line would be completed. Without any time to rest, Hathaway and Sulen returned to the secret realm with the automatic Mageweth inscription instrument. At this time, the clay golem production line in the secret realm was almost completed. After Hathaway installed the equipment, she directly connected it to the energy source. Although he had a lot of information about his own work, he still needed to make adjustments. The light blue elemental energy entered the golem factory through the energy channel, and the entire golem factory began to slowly activate. A few clay golems, who were the workers, woke up from their standby mode and got ready to work. Tower Spirit, Builder Number 1 activated. Systems self-check in progress. Systems self-check complete. Beginning program loading. Loading progress, 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%. Loading complete. Clay Golem Model 3 automatic production line in progress. Connection complete. The clay golems, who had been quietly waiting for the notification, instantly began to move. Tower Spirit, Builder Number 1 was the name of the tower spirit of the automatic Mageweth inscription machine. This legendary tower spirit was also the brain of the entire clay golem production line. It was under its control that the automatic production line began to operate normally. Activate the clay golem production line. With Sulen's order, the clay golem production line was instantly activated. Several clay golems began to operate the machine, and card after card of clay was sent to the grinder to be crushed. The clay was only considered complete after it became very fine like flour. Next, the crushed clay was sent to the blender to be mixed. While mixing, magical essential oil, elemental powder, and other materials were added. Finally, the evenly mixed clay was sent to the press to be made into a standard clay golem construct. After a series of processes, these parts were sent to the rune inscription workshop, and the automatic rune inscription device would inscribe the runes. Hathaway and Sulan looked at the processed clay golem part with a serious expression, and a bright ray lit up. It was the Eye Devil's secondary eye that Hathaway had processed before that emitted this ray. It was still a little thick when it first appeared, but it immediately began to shrink. The measuring table next to it accurately measured the data of the instrument's beam. If the data did not meet the requirements, the production would be rejected. The beam corrector next to it was used to correct this place. Next to the Eye Devil's secondary eye, there was an energy controller that controlled the power of the beam. Under the control of Builder Number 1, the beam quickly reached the product's requirements. Then it began to inscribe the runes, and the prepared arcane powder and gem powder began to be thrown in. As the beam moved quickly on the part, an accurate rune appeared on that part. After some debugging, the rune inscription device became faster and faster. In just 3 minutes, the rune inscription on a part was completed. Hathaway picked up the produced part and looked at it. This clay golem part was almost exactly the same as the one she designed. Although it was not as good as the one she made herself, it was still a good product. This automatic rune inscription device could inscribe runes on 6 parts at a time. Of course, it could also let 6 beams work together to inscribe one part. With the operation of the golem production line, a clay golem was soon produced. After Sulan walked around the clay golem, he found that it was no different from a normal golem. After seeing the successful production of a golem, Hathaway and Sulan were relieved. The golem production line was finally completed. Builder Number 1. I'm here, Master. The Tower Genie's cold mechanical voice sounded. Suspend production. Let those clay golems come over and stand properly. Hathaway pointed to the clay golems that were working. Yes, Master. Soon, several clay golems were neatly arranged in front of Hathaway. Hathaway took out a silver-white carving knife. These clay golems were different from the ones that had just been produced. Some of the workmanship of the golem production line had been added to them. However, during the operation just now, there were some small problems with these modified clay golems. Now, Hathaway needed to modify them. The main work of the modification was on the palms. Hathaway used the carving knife to give them more dexterous hands. At the same time, she engraved new runes on the finger joints and wrist joints, which could strengthen the flexibility of the clay golem's hands. Combat golems did not need this kind of precise modification. Only this kind of auxiliary type needed it. The cost of this modification alone was enough to build an additional clay golem. Although the auxiliary type golems were not good at fighting, their cost was usually much higher than the combat type golems. The auxiliary type golems needed to be instilled with more professional knowledge. Only with this knowledge could they carry out various work according to the situation on the spot. Their palms were very flexible. Only in this way could they carry out various work. After completing the operation of the clay golem production line, the next step was to officially complete the installation of the production line. At the same time, the factory also needed to be built. Sulan deliberately opened up a space of about 1,800 square meters, and then built a clay golem production line workshop according to the style of the factory in his previous life. The creation of the clay golem could be divided into 3 parts. The first part was the construction of the limbs. This step could be done by disassembling them. This part was directly made through the mold press. It was not difficult, and even a wizard apprentice could do it. The second step was to carry out various treatments to make these clay parts set in shape and at the same time become difficult to damage. Only after this kind of magical treatment could the clay golems continue to be produced. Otherwise, the clay golems could only be clay, and a piece could be knocked off with a casual swing of a stick. They could not fight or work at all. Only after this magical treatment, the clay would become as hard as rock. The third step was the most critical magic pattern inscription. Only after the magic pattern inscription was completed could the clay golem perform various actions as if it had a life of its own. Of course, the premise was that it had energy. The fourth step was to assemble the body structure. This step was like piecing together toy models to assemble the complete structure of the golem. The assembly workshop had the most clay golems. In fact, it was also a maintenance workshop. Damaged clay golems would be replaced here. The benefits of the standardization of parts proposed by Su Len were fully reflected here. If a part was damaged, it could be directly removed and replaced with a new one. As long as the damage was not too serious, or the soul core was destroyed, the maintenance problems of these golems could be solved. The last part was the casting and activation. This part was not automated for the time being. In fact, this step could be activated through the tower spirit. The activation spell could be inputted into the tower spirit, and the magic of the elemental pool could complete the activation of the golem. However, because the value of the clay golem was not high, Hathaway and Su Len did not want to add another tower spirit. It should be known that the cost of such a tower spirit was about 1,000,000 kinnar. Moreover, Su Len also wanted to build other golem production lines, which would cost a lot of legendary soul crystals to make tower spirits. Naturally, he was not willing to invest too much in this production line. In fact, activating the clay golem only required those high-grade wizards to come over and cast a spell every once in a while. Chapter 468. The main material of the clay golem was high-quality clay, which was plentiful near Northtown City. Building a clay golem required about 1,000 pounds of clay. Making a clay golem was like making ceramics. Although the clay golem wasn't a very powerful golem, there were always some exceptions. Once in the era of the Arcane Empire, there was an arcanist who was proficient in making clay golems. He made a powerful clay golem that had self-healing ability and could use spells to attack. This arcanist had invented a material called memory clay. After the clay was formed, it would remember its original appearance. After being attacked from a distance and the clay golem was broken, it would only take a few minutes for the clay golem to condense and return to its original appearance. Unless the clay was completely destroyed, it would quickly recover. The arcanist used memory clay to make a large number of clay golems. It was said that the clay golem's fighting strength was on the same level as the steel golems. Of course, the memory clay golems were eventually annihilated in the long river of time. Su Len naturally didn't have any information about the clay golems. The clay golems he made were just ordinary clay golems. The clay golems made by the production line were transported to the warehouse for preservation. These clay golems didn't use soul crystals as their cores. When using them, one only needed to put a soul crystal in them and cast a spell to activate them. Because they didn't use the tower spirit to activate them, after a certain number of clay golems were accumulated, several high-grade wizards would take turns to cast spells to activate the clay golems. In order to complete the golem production line as soon as possible, Hathaway and Surin had been busy during this period. The automatic Mageweth inscription machine, which was the most important part of the golem production line, took 2 weeks, while the other parts, such as the energy channel and site construction, only took 3 days. The clay golems on the production line were made by Su Len, which took him a week. These clay golems were then modified by Hathaway and instilled with various knowledge. After the clay golem assembly line started running, Su Len and Hathaway began to make some adjustments to the golems to make the production line run more smoothly. At the same time, the conformity rate of the golem assembly line also increased. After a day of operation, the conformity rate of the various parts produced on the golem assembly line had reached 95%. The entire golem factory operated like an assembly line. The head, torso, limbs, and various other parts were all made separately. All the parts were made according to the standard parts, and the deviation was less than 0.1 coefficient. Su Len specially made 2 clay golems for them to check whether the various parts met the requirements. The parts that did not meet the requirements would be directly picked out, and only the parts that met the requirements could enter the next stage. These parts were assembled by the clay golem engineer. Su Len upgraded its soul crystal to a high-level soul crystal. He would assemble and test the golems. Only the qualified golems would be placed in the warehouse after the assembly was completed. After 3 days of normal operation, Su Len made a detailed calculation of the clay golem assembly line. If the clay golem assembly line ran at full capacity, it could produce 10 clay golems a day. According to this output, it could produce 300 clay golems a month. But in fact, the Northwind Tower didn't need so many clay golems right now. Sulen planned to only produce a few hundred clay golems and send them to the Wizard Tower, the Secret Realm, the Underground World, and other places. Sulen had arranged for people to collect the materials for the golem workshop. Among them, the amount of high-quality clay was the largest, but this could be dug up by the slaves and then sent over after a period of time. As for things like magic essential oil and elemental dust, the amount used was not large. After one addition, they could be used for a long time. Sulen actually didn't care much about the clay golem assembly line. On the contrary, he cared more about the stone golem assembly line and the steel golem assembly line. The clay golem assembly line was at best an attempt to accumulate experience. Then, on the basis of the clay golem assembly line, he would build a better stone golem assembly line and steel golem assembly line. In fact, the technology of the stone golem assembly line was not much different from that of the clay golem assembly line. This time, there was no need for crushing, mixing, and molding. Ordinary stone golems only needed high-quality granite or high-quality marble, but obsidian golems needed obsidian as a material, and obsidian was harder than ordinary stone and more difficult to process. Northern Battlefront City was rich in mineral resources, but there weren't many obsidian ores. Most of the obsidian ores discovered in the underworld had been used to construct the Northwind Tower. Now, there wasn't enough obsidian in the underworld. Obsidian ores were mainly produced in volcanic areas. There were no volcanoes within a few hundred miles of the Northwind City. There were no volcanoes even in the underground world, so there was not much obsidian ores produced here. Obsidian ores were the main material for making obsidian golems and gargoyles. It was indispensable. If Sulen wanted to get a large amount of obsidian ores, he could only buy them from other countries. However, this method had a lot of hidden dangers. Obsidian ores were strategic resources. Once the supply was cut off, the Northwind City would be at a loss, and the production of obsidian golems would no longer be able to continue. In his past life, Sulen knew the power of a trade war. Back then, Mao Xiong was almost dead because of the trade war with the United States. His economy had always been poor, and Sulen did not want anyone to have a hold on him. Another reason was that obsidian ores were very expensive. Once the Northwind City built an obsidian golem production line, a lot of obsidian ores would be consumed. Every month, the Kinnar ores would be used to buy obsidian ores. Although Sulen was rich, he still felt the pinch. There were a few ways to get obsidian ores without obsidian ores. The simplest way was to find an empty space and use the power of spells to change the environment and lead the underground lava out. However, this method was very difficult. Even legendary wizards would have a hard time doing it. The second method was to capture an adult red dragon. Creatures like red dragons had radiation around their bodies. If they lived in a place for a long time, they would slowly change the environment and landscape of the place. Finally, they would turn the area into magma. Under normal circumstances, red dragons like to live in volcanic areas. However, capturing an adult red dragon was less difficult than the previous method. The third way was to go to the fire elemental plane and capture magma elementals that could make lava. Magma elementals also had the ability to change the environment. They could turn the ground into lava. This method was the technology used to build an obsidian factory. It was the technology that Sulen and Hathaway secretly obtained in the Emerald Tower. Obsidian ores were very important, and a lot of them were needed in the floating cities. The requirements for the construction of a floating city were very high. The entire city had to be built with obsidian ores, so most of the time, there would be an obsidian factory in every floating city. These obsidian factories usually used magma elementals as the main force to produce obsidian ores. Chapter 469. Obsidian had good physical and magical resistance. It was the main material for the construction of the floating city, and the amount consumed was astronomical. The foundation of a floating city must be built with obsidian, and cutting corners on other things was absolutely unacceptable. As for using ordinary rocks and hardening spells, it was also impossible. The floating city was a super city that could fly freely in the sky and even in the astral world. It was also the most powerful battle fortress of the wizards. He didn't want to use this method just to save money. If the floating city, which was worth hundreds of billions of Kinner's fake, was damaged because of quality problems, Sulen would have nowhere to cry. The construction of the rock golem production line was not urgent. With the experience of building the clay golem production line, the rock golem production line needed further adjustment. Besides, he had just spent so much energy building the clay golem production line. Hathaway also needed to rest for a while. Otherwise, what if she was hungry and thin? Although Hathaway had always been majestic, and Sulen had measured it himself, he didn't want to reduce the heavy pressure on his chest. Any man would want to be big. Big was the truth. After Sulen returned to the northern town, Chris also returned from the underground world. After a period of mining, the underground world had begun to produce gold. In addition to gold, other metals such as silver, copper, iron, lead, and even a variety of magic gems were also produced in small amounts. The most important thing was the production of 3 kilograms of adamantine. Adamantine was very difficult to refine. Ordinary blacksmiths had no way to do it. Only the dwarves had mastered the refining method. The blacksmiths of the human kingdom had no way to refine this metal. The wizards had a way to refine it, and it was more advanced than the dwarves' technology, but it was still very difficult. Even in the era of the Arcane Empire, it was more troublesome to refine adamantine in large quantities. Although 3 kilograms of adamantine was not much, it meant that the northern town had a stable output of adamantine. Adamantine was the same as mithril. Although it was indispensable in many cases, it was generally not used in large quantities. Although 3 kilograms was not much, it was almost enough if they saved a little every month. Seeing that the little succubus Chris had returned, Sulen was so excited that he couldn't sleep. During this time, he was so busy with work that he didn't have time to play a few rounds of Gwent with them. This card game was a multiplayer game. The more people there were, the more interesting it would be. This game had another name, which was Lei Feng's card game. If he lost, he would have to accept the punishment. Sulen had prepared everything. He found a box in the mezzanine of his study and opened it. There were more than 10 kinds of whips of different lengths. These whips were also made of different materials. After selecting, Sulen chose an exquisitely woven linen whip, several red cotton ropes, and several candles. Then, he went to Chris's room. The game was very intense. The little succubus Chris and Sulen were opponents. Halfway through the game, the little succubus could not take it anymore and could only beg for mercy. Sulen then called the 2 half-elf maids, Angela, over to play Gwent together. Sullen's spear art had reached the large success stage, and the impact was powerful. Everywhere he passed, there was no one who didn't beg for mercy. The night passed in silence. He hadn't played for a long time, and he was a little high last night. He was still a little lethargic, but the ending was still good. The roads in northern town were blocked by heavy snow. The city was preparing for the new year. The festival was brought by Sulen. Only he would hold such a festival. But at this moment, an embroidered uniform guard brought news of the war. The rebellious nobles in the south elected the Medici family as their king, and they have established their own country. The Medici family ascended the throne and established a country? Sulen, who was sitting on the main seat, was slightly stunned. The Medici family was also one of the elector families in the Kingdom of Florence. However, this elector family's strength had always been at the bottom of the Kingdom of Florence. He did not expect that they would dare to stand out this time. Ever since he ascended the throne, the nobles in the southern provinces rebelled. Because he was not strong enough, Sulen did not crusade against them. He only condemned them at the official level. The new army in San Filto City was not much. Sullen's original plan was to pacify the north before marching to the south. In the end, the nobles in the south elected the Medici family to ascend the throne and establish a country. This was no longer a matter of rebellion. Although the embroidered uniform guard recruited by Sulen had begun to infiltrate the south, they did not get much information. Now, not only had they ascended the throne, but they had also formed an army and were preparing to attack. Sulen, who received the news, could not sit still anymore. He was not worried about the northern citadel, but he was not worried about San Filto City. Without him, Phyllis alone would not be able to control the situation. Sulen returned to San Filto City through the teleportation portal. As soon as he arrived, Phyllis hugged Sulen tightly and did not let go. "What's wrong? Did someone bully my little baby?" Sulen felt the moisture on his chest and asked softly as he caressed Phyllis's northern region. "It's you, you big bad guy. You didn't come to see me for more than a month. I'll bite you to death," Phyllis said as she bared her two little silver teeth at Sulen and bit down hard on Sulen's body. Sulen did not feel any pain. He was just worried that his skin was too hard and her teeth would bite him. He quickly controlled his muscles and pretended to be in extreme pain. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm sorry. Let me rub it for you," Phyllis said nervously when she saw Sulen's expression. Sulen chuckled in his heart. He lifted her up by the waist and carried her back to her bedroom, ignoring her resistance. Soon, a melodious song came from the palace. Early the next morning, Sulen called for a court meeting. All the nobles of San Filto City came to attend. When everyone was present, Sulen asked a servant to come forward and announce the rebellion of the nobles in the south. He and Phyllis sat on the throne with no expression on their faces. However, Phyllis seemed to be sleep-deprived and could not lift her spirits. After the servant finished speaking, the nobles in the hall all had different expressions. To these nobles, ever since Sulen ascended the throne, he had been weakening and suppressing their forces and taking over their interests. Those who dared to resist before had been suppressed by Sulen. The remaining nobles kept everything in their hearts and were waiting for an opportunity. Now that they heard that the nobles in the south had united to build a kingdom, they all wanted to watch a good show. The nobles in the south did not care about the rebellion of the nobles in the north. They even wanted them to come quickly and completely overthrow the cruel and corrupt Sulen. Of course, not all of these nobles wanted Sulen to die. Some of them surrendered to him, such as Rex, who was the Minister of Internal Affairs. This Earl Rex was the first to surrender to him. He was also very proficient in internal affairs. Now, he was handling most of the government affairs in the Kingdom of Florence. Sulen and Phyllis were just controlling the general direction. Rex stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, the rebels in the south have openly built a kingdom. This is a blatant rebellion. They even formed an army to attack. This is very strange." Although the nobles in the south were richer than the north, the south had been peaceful and prosperous for a long time. The strength of the army was very low. It was far from being a match for the northern army that often fought with the orcs. Now that they dared to take the initiative to attack, it would be strange if there was nothing strange. Sulen smiled leisurely and glanced at the nobles in the hall. "There is something strange, but don't worry about it. Since they came, let's just send them to their deaths." "Your Majesty, I am willing to be the vanguard and lead the army to kill all these rebels," a general said loudly. Before he finished, the generals around him all puffed out their chests and patted Sulen's chest. They all wanted to be the first to send troops to destroy the rebellion in the south. These old men who had followed Sulen since he was in the northern town had blind confidence in Sulen's strength. Many of them worshipped Sulen blindly. After so many battles, Sulen was a god in these people's eyes. They were not worried that Sulen would lose at all. On top of that, Sulen was very generous to his own people. The salary of the soldiers was very high, and they were given land. These generals were also given many castles and manors by Sulen. As long as they performed meritorious deeds, Sulen would not be stingy with the rewards. When Sulen ascended the throne last time, he rewarded 2 counts and 6 viscounts. Although these titles were not given land, they were still rewarded with many castles and manors. Now that there was a chance to fight, these generals could not wait to put on their armor and go to war. They wanted to use the heads of the rebels to increase their ranks. Sulen did not say anything. His fingers tapped on the throne rhythmically. Soon, the hall quieted down. Only the rhythmic tapping sound could be heard. Are you done? Sulan sat up straight when he saw these people had quieted down. Since you are done, I will start now. Sulan looked around and continued, since the rebels in the south are in a hurry to die, I will personally send them on their way. The hall fell into silence. Then, it became noisy. Your Majesty, you cannot. Your Majesty, as the king, how can you take the brunt of the arrows? As long as you give the order, I will definitely bring the Medici family back to you. Your Majesty, I am willing to share your burden. When they heard that Sulan was going to personally take action, the nobles who had already surrendered to him immediately tried to dissuade him. However, most of the nobles just pretended to persuade him. Their acting skills improved. If it was not for the fact that Sulan's system data showed that their loyalty had not reached 60, he might have believed them. Acting skills? They said it as if no one could. Sulan immediately pretended to be arrogant and said, there is no need to persuade me. I have made up my mind. P.S. That's all for today. I will make up for the rest in a few days when I am not busy. Thank you to Feng AI Yuanqing for your 1500 Qidian coins tip. Thank you to 1989 for your 500 Qidian coins tip. Thank you to Orochi 886 and Immortal Path for your 500 Qidian coins tip. Thank you to Eve who knows how to cut vegetables, Yunzhong 128, Old Qin Han, Lord Zishuan, Feng Mei Nagua, Tavern Long Time Not Seen, CQS Qingsheng, Universe Galaxy Overlord, and other book friends for their tips. Fu Meng thanks. Happy New Year everyone, love you. Wax. Chapter 470. Sulan's gaze landed on a figure in the corner of the hall. That person nodded slightly at Sulan. He was Sulan's appointed guardian of the embroidered uniform guards. After being strengthened by the system, the embroidered uniform guards' ability to do things far surpassed their counterparts in the Ming dynasty. There were many other places that had spies planted in the nobles' houses and even the merchants' houses in San Filto City. Their identities were all different, ranging from butlers, coachmen, guards, attendants, maids, and so on. Ever since he ascended the throne, Sulan had been suppressing these nobles step by step. Although it seemed that the thorns had been removed by Sulan and the rest were honest, he didn't think that these nobles would know their place. There was a saying that blocking someone's money was akin to killing their parents. Sulan's actions weren't just a matter of money. Even his power had been suppressed by more than half. These nobles were only forced by Sulan's ferocious might to appear honest and harmless. In reality, as long as Sulan showed his weak side, these nobles would immediately turn into tigers that ate people without spitting out the bones. Sulan was very clear about these people's ruthlessness, so he had never relaxed his surveillance of these people. Although he was not familiar with political struggles, he had watched many TV dramas in his previous life. There were many precedents to learn from. The most famous example was Emperor Chongzhen. He was fooled by others and directly abolished the imperial bodyguards. He cut off his own eyes and ears. In the end, he could only hang himself on a mountain. During this period of time, the embroidered uniform guards had gathered and summarized a large amount of information. Sulan discovered that the reason why the southern rebels had the courage to attack Sulan was because the northern nobles had made a private deal with the southern nobles. Their goal was simple. They wanted to transfer all the elite troops near San Filto City to fight a decisive battle with the southern rebels. Then, the nobles who had been accumulating their strength would stab them in the back. Although it was very risky, there wouldn't be a chance if they didn't act now. As Sulan attacked the nobles, won over the commoners, distributed farmland, and unified the tax system, the lives of the commoners at the bottom became better and better. As time passed, the commoners who benefited would support Sulan even more. It would be more difficult to overthrow him. Moreover, this was done under the premise of harming their interests. Sulan was surprised that these nobles could endure for so long before they took revenge. These nobles had long lost the elegance of their ancestors. For such a big matter like this, keeping it a secret was the most important thing. But what about them? These nobles only secretly held a meeting to discuss and used the nobles' ball as a cover. They thought that they had avoided Sullen's eyes and ears. However, they didn't know that all of this had already fallen into the eyes of the embroidered uniform guards who were paying attention to these people. There was no doubt that the matters these people discussed that day would be organized into a book and sent to Sullen's study at night. As for the southern nobles, the embroidered uniform guards didn't have enough manpower and couldn't collect too much confidential information. Su Len had been looking for opportunities to weaken the strength of these nobles, but he didn't have a good excuse. Now that these nobles finally took the initiative to jump out, he didn't extinguish these things before it happened. Instead, he pushed the boat with the current to help them. As the lead actor and director of this scene, Su Len was very willing to cooperate, but his appearance fee was a little expensive. After hearing that Su Len had decided to lead the army personally, many nobles in the hall were surprised. Their original intention was to eliminate Sullen's army, but they didn't expect Su Len to go personally this time. Since this was the case, it was a good opportunity to deal with them together. As for the losses, in their eyes, it was only the southern nobles. The army recruited in Sanfilto City was taken away by Su Len, and the soldiers he brought from North Town City were also taken away. Only a mere 6,000 people were left to guard the city. The entire city's defense became empty. Of course, when Su Len made the decision, there were officials who objected, saying that it would cause the city to be empty and that more nobles should be gathered to form an army. However, this suggestion was directly rejected by him. If Sanfilto City wasn't empty, how could those people cause trouble and bury them all? The stage was already set up, and now all that was left was for the supporting characters to start the show. There were many things that needed to be done before the army went to war. When they were in North Town City, the number of soldiers was small, and a few hundred people could be sent out quickly. Now, there were a total of 25,000 soldiers in Sanfilto City. In addition, the number of civilians wasn't any less than the regular army. The daily consumption of 50,000 soldiers was a huge number. By the time they officially set out, it was already a month later. The 50,000 soldiers majestically charged towards the south of the Kingdom of Florence. The army went all the way south. About half a month later, Su Len entered the territory of the southern nobles. That was when the war officially began. Your Majesty. Kent stepped forward and saluted. These southern rebels have no intention of fighting a decisive battle with us. They have only been strengthening the defense and clearing the land. They seem to be luring us to go deeper. At this time, Su Len naturally wouldn't hide anything from his subordinates. He nodded and said, I know, these people are indeed luring us to go deeper. But what they didn't expect was that they weren't luring a fat sheep, but a giant dragon. Your Majesty, if we continue to go deeper, the supplies of these 50,000 soldiers won't be able to keep up. Kent said helplessly, those rebels are strengthening the defense and clearing the land. We can't even gather a single grain of food in the south. The food in the cities that they abandoned has also been transported away. How about we? Su Len understood what he meant. He wanted to directly rob the civilians in the cities. The civilians still had some food in their hands, but if he did that, even if he defeated the southern rebels in the end, he would only get 1,000 miles of barren land. So, he spent so much effort just to get a piece of land that was already in ruins? Su Len didn't want a Kingdom of Florence that was in ruins. What he wanted was the rich south. Su Len said with a serious expression, don't rob. You don't have to worry about the supplies. Someone will send them over soon. Yes, Your Majesty. Seeing Sullen's serious expression, Kent immediately stood up straight and said. Su Len nodded with satisfaction. Do you think the southern rebels can hold on like this? Strengthening the defense and clearing the land is easy to say. How much damage will this cause? Do you think the rebels can hold on? Looking at the other generals in the tent, Su Len smiled and explained, the southern provinces have developed a lot of commerce. Most of the time, they rely on trade. If we start a war with such great fanfare, do you think the merchant caravans will still dare to do business? In addition to strengthening the defense and clearing the land, food, bridges, wells, and even the forests near the cities will be destroyed. The villages will have to migrate. This kind of destruction is enough to make them feel the pain. For those greedy nobles, short-term losses were acceptable, but that was for the sake of the rich profits later. However, once the capital invested was too much, these short-sighted nobles wouldn't accept it. So, the southern rebels wouldn't be able to hold on for long. The generals around him immediately looked at him with admiration and flattery. Those nobles who sided with Su Len even shamelessly started to flatter him. Your Majesty is wise and powerful, unparalleled in the world. You can destroy a mere rebellion with a flick of your finger. Your Majesty is indeed your Majesty. You can't be compared to us mortals. You can see through the real situation of those rebels with just one look. Su Len shook his head. This is just my more detailed observation. It's no big deal. Although he said so, it felt good to be flattered. So, it was easy to become arrogant after being a king for a long time. Only a good man like Su Len who could see his own heart clearly could remain unmoved. The southern rebels lured Su Len deeper into the south. Su Len pretended not to notice anything and was very cooperative. He even deliberately sent a portion of his soldiers to take over the cities and deliberately weakened their strength. When they were 2,000 miles away from San Filto City, the people in the capital finally couldn't take it anymore and started to take action. After a supply team transporting provisions entered the southern territory, they were attacked by the southern rebel cavalry. The supply team belonged to the nobles. As a result, they naturally scattered and took away what they could and burned what they couldn't. The news of the supply team being destroyed was naturally sent back immediately. Then, the capital had to organize a new batch of supplies to send over. However, at this time, a batch of supplies had just been sent over and the new supplies were still being prepared. They couldn't be sent out in a short period of time. A series of problems arose from the recruitment of civilian workers, the mobilization of vehicles, the collection of provisions, and so on. The nobles who stayed behind began to shirk their responsibilities and find all kinds of reasons to stall for time. Although Phyllis had been dealing with government affairs for a period of time, she still had a headache facing the alliance of these old foxes. If there was enough time, she could deal with them one by one. However, the situation was urgent and there was no time for her to deal with them. As the minister who stayed behind to assist Phyllis, Rex immediately noticed that there wasn't much going on. As an old fox who had been an official for 30 years, he was naturally familiar with such tricks. In the past, there would only be 1 or 2 problems at most. How could there be problems at every step? Your Majesty, the nobles have teamed up. Rex immediately reported to Phyllis. Your Majesty is now on an expedition. If there is a problem with the logistics, the consequences will be unimaginable. Phyllis frowned. Sir Rex, do you have any good ideas? There is a way, but time is too tight. It is very likely that we won't be able to make it in time. Let's not worry about that for now. Quickly solve it. At this moment, a guard hurried over and said, Your Majesty, the brocade guards request an audience. Chapter 471. Phyllis said irritably, Can't you see that we are discussing something important here? Let them wait for a while. Your Majesty, he brought His Majesty the King's warrant. The guard quickly said. Sullen's warrant? Let them in. Phyllis suddenly reacted and said. Soon, an ordinary-looking man came into the palace. He first bowed to Phyllis solemnly and said, Your Majesty, His Majesty the King had expected this when he left, so he specially ordered me to come. Phyllis was a little surprised, but she quickly reacted. As an old fox, Rex immediately understood after hearing the words of the guard. I see. Rex nodded and said, Does His Majesty want us to capture the rebels? The guard shook his head with a smile and said, Not so. His Majesty wants Her Majesty the Queen and Sir Rex to continue with what you are supposed to do. Don't let them notice anything unusual. Those who were making a move now were all small fries. The real mastermind would not expose himself so easily. These nobles who had controlled the power of Florence for hundreds of years were naturally unwilling to let their power be taken away. They were the real mastermind behind this matter. Sullen's plan was actually not complicated at all. After knowing that the nobles had begun to contact the rebels in the south, he had been preparing. Now, many of the nobles in San Filto City were involved, but there were still some who hid very well. This time, he planned to capture all of them. In addition to dealing with these nobles, Sulen also planned to kill two birds with one stone. He wanted to take this opportunity to deal with the rebels in the south. So, he deliberately gave them a chance to see hope. Then, when they were about to succeed, he would completely destroy their hope and uproot them. These nobles were already the biggest obstacle to him taking control of the Kingdom of Florence. Only by getting rid of them could the Kingdom of Florence continue to grow. Who is the general of the rebels in the south? His command is quite good. On a nameless hill in the south, two large armies were confronting each other from a few miles away. Sulen carefully observed the rebels. These rebels looked good. They were in a neat formation and their armor was bright. Although they were not powerful soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles, they were definitely not a mob. Sulen had been through a lot of battles, so he was able to distinguish the strength of his opponents. Compared to the army behind him, the Southern Rebel Army's equipment was actually better than theirs. Looking at the current situation, the Southern Rebel Army looked like a regular army, while the army behind him looked more like a mixed army. This was something that couldn't be helped. After all, the southern provinces were much richer than the northern provinces. However, apart from equipment, although the southern army's momentum was not bad, it was still lacking compared to the army behind him. The patriarch of the Medici family, Acer, was overwhelmed with emotion. Originally, their family had the lowest chance of becoming the royal family of Florence. Their family was also at the bottom of the list of elector families in the Kingdom of Florence. But now, things had changed. The Henry family had no descendants, and an outsider had ascended to the throne. This was a godsend opportunity. The king, who was said to be a pioneer noble, did not understand the unspoken rules among the nobles at all. As soon as he ascended to the throne, he began to touch the cake of the other nobles. As a result, many nobles rebelled. In the end, this king was really tough. He directly led his people to destroy the nobles and even took away their territories. This was simply unimaginable among the nobles. Therefore, when the northern nobles took the initiative to contact him and said that they were willing to support him as the king, he was tempted. For this reason, he personally contacted the southern nobles and was ready to completely destroy Sulen in one fell swoop. Not long ago, he lured Sullen's army south. As northerners, many people were not used to the climate in the south. After the battle line was long enough, he easily cut off the follow-up food supply according to the information provided by the spies. Without food supplies, even a strong army would collapse. After the food supply was cut off, the king began to panic. He did not continue to pursue and directly led his army to retreat. However, in the face of such a rare opportunity, how could Acer let it go? He had already planned. After defeating Sulen, he would directly go to San Filto City to ascend to the throne and take over all the inheritance of the Henry family. When that time came, the Medici family would be the most powerful family in the Kingdom of Florence. Your Majesty, the enemy's general is Acer, the patriarch of the Medici family, the brocade uniform guard beside him said respectfully. So it's him. It seems that we don't have to look for him everywhere. This battle will solve the problem. Sulen nodded and said. He did not care about the 100,000 soldiers opposite him at all. But Your Majesty, we don't have enough food now. Kent said softly. The news had not spread yet, but the generals naturally knew. After all, Sulen did not hide it. Sulen flicked the whip in his hand and said softly, "Hee, I know that. There is a rebellion in the capital, so the supplies there will not be coming." Kent was stunned. Sulen had always said that there was no need to worry about the supplies and that they would be sent over. Now, he was told that there was no food. Your Majesty, we are already thousands of miles into the enemy's territory. Now that there is no food, how are we going to fight this battle? Judging from the king's expression, he did not seem to be worried at all. Suluan waved his hand and signaled the army to move forward and prepare for war. He then said in a relaxed tone, "Those rebellious nobles think that they can defeat me by joining forces with the southern rebels. I've known about this for a long time. They think that they can choke me by cutting off the food supply to San Filto City and blocking the roads with ice and snow in Northtown City. They are too naive. I have more than just San Filto City and North City." There were 25,000 soldiers in the regular army and 50,000 strong men in total. Although they were not as strong as North City's army, there were thousands of knights and hundreds of head knights and knight commanders. With Sullen's help, there was no way the 100,000 strong army could win unless all of them were knights. The only way to win was to stall Sullen's army and cut off their food supply so that they would collapse without a fight. This time, with the help of a spy, it seemed that they had succeeded on the surface, but it was only on the surface. Sulan had already cleared out his storage dimension before he left. There were 100 cubic meters of military food in his storage dimension. Sulan made this military food using potatoes. He would dry the potatoes and grind them into powder. Then, he would add oil, salt, diced meat, vegetables, and many other spices to make this military food. This military food could provide a soldier with all kinds of energy for a day. 1 pound per person was enough. 1 cubic meter of military food was about 1,200 kilograms. 100 cubic meters of military food was 120 tons. It was enough to feed the 50,000 soldiers for a week. Apart from that, he also asked Marquis Savoy's territory to send out a reinforcement from Cult City with a large amount of supplies. Sulan also left a backup plan. He made a teleportation coordinate. If he needed it, he could ask Hathaway to teleport a large amount of food over. None of the nobles in San Filto City knew about this. Sulan was not worried about the lack of food at all. Besides, he did not have enough food. 1 week was enough for him to defeat the enemy. If he ran out of food, how could the 100,000 strong army run out of food? Sulan said with a playful expression, "They think they can win if they stall us. Aren't we also preparing to quell the rebellion in the south? Let's go." Sulan looked at the army with high morale and gave the order. "Raise your spirits. Raise the morale. Group haste. Group enchanted weapon. Group bears endurance." Beams of light rose from Sullen's body. The strength of the vanguard of the army instantly increased by a large margin. The army, which had been holding back for a long time, suddenly erupted. The 25,000 soldiers split into 3 groups and advanced together. On the other side, Asser looked at the approaching army and suddenly panicked. The enemy army did not collapse like he expected. Instead, they took the initiative to attack. Just as he had a bad premonition, the 2 armies collided, but the result shocked the southern rebels. The opposing army cut through them like they were vegetables, instantly tearing holes in their formation. In order to prepare for this battle, Sulan purposely let the elite soldiers of North Town take the lead. These soldiers were at least Grand Knights. They were wearing excellent armor and holding sharp blades. After being buffed with spells, they were like little superhumans. Against the rebels, who were at most novice knights, it was like a tiger among a flock of sheep. They easily saw through the enemy's formation. The army behind them swarmed forward. The rebels in the south were forced to retreat. In less than 10 minutes, the vanguard began to collapse. When Sulan saw this, he did not want to miss this opportunity. He immediately ordered the army to press forward. The long period of peace had weakened the rebels in the south. Even though they had been trained and reorganized, they were still weaker than the northern army, not to mention the elites of Northtown City. The army continued to drive the defeated rebels forward. Asser, who lacked battle experience and wisdom, wanted to drive the defeated rebels forward. However, as soon as the order was given, the army behind the rebels was also scattered. Seeing this, Sulan knew that the result of this battle was already decided. In the wilderness, the rebels were running everywhere. Out of 100,000 soldiers, only 5,000 of them were defeated. In the end, it led to a complete collapse. Sulen was shocked that the rebels in the south were defeated so easily. Chapter 472. Sulen was surprised by the extent of the corruption of the southern nobles. They dared to rebel at such a level. Of the 100,000 soldiers, only 7 or 8,000 were killed, and the rest fled in defeat. At this time, the battlefield was in chaos. Scattered soldiers were everywhere. Under the leadership of the northern citadel's elites, the army chased the scattered soldiers away like ducks. Sulen was experienced in battle. He commanded the army to attack the weak points of the southern rebel army. Most of the time, people had the misconception that the commander of the southern rebel army, Asser, was one of them. He had never led a large army in battle, and it was already very good that he could lead 100,000 soldiers. But when the battle really started, he would make stupid moves and fall into a dilemma. The difference between a famous general and a normal general was that they could create opportunities, seize the enemy's weakness, and concentrate their forces to attack the enemy's weak points. Apart from a small number of truly talented generals, the vast majority of famous generals relied on accumulated experience to improve their judgment. When it came to experience, no one on the battlefield was more experienced than Sulen. After the front line was defeated, Sulen saw the weakness of the southern rebel army. As the commander, Asser panicked. He gave a dozen orders in a row, and the result was that the army became even more chaotic. Seeing this situation, Sulen directly sent the cavalry to take the opportunity to rush forward. The waves of attacks came one after another and completely defeated the southern rebels. The more the defeated army was defeated, the more the defeated army would be hit by the seawater. Generally, people had a herd mentality. When the defeated army reached a certain scale, they would directly take the army that had not collapsed and flee together with it. After the southern rebel army collapsed, Sulen released all of his troops to expel and capture them. Sulen didn't kill all of these defeated troops. In his opinion, these 100,000 troops were all able-bodied laborers. It would be a waste to kill all of them. Beifong Principality was still short of manpower. Even if all of them were sent there, it wouldn't be enough. Of course, Sulen also paid attention to the nobles. These southern nobles were all very rich. Sulen planned to squeeze some money out of them. Sulen could be said to be spending money like water. This time, he came to the south to make a big splash. Just as Sulen chased the southern rebel army away like ducks, the big show in San Filto City began. At this time, in a luxurious manner in San Filto City, the nobles who had been preparing for a long time had received news that Sulen's army was entangled with the southern noble army. Therefore, these nobles who were about to lose their patience were ready to take action. These nobles had long lost the bravery of their ancestors. However, each family still had a few experts. Moreover, they also had a lot of private soldiers. Apart from private soldiers, they also had a lot of knights. The strength of a noble was limited. However, with a dozen or more noble families added together, it was not a problem to pull out an army of a few thousand people. These nobles didn't need to work. Instead, they enjoyed themselves from day to night. If they wanted to support their large families and their many servant armies, they couldn't rely on farming alone. Therefore, these nobles had a lot of mines and shops. Farming was only a small part of it. Hundreds of years of accumulation was not just for show. For this day, these nobles took out a lot of gold and silver to bribe the remaining troops. The San Filto city's army, from the captains to the generals, were all brought by Sulen from the northern city. How could they be bribed? However, if they couldn't be bribed, they wouldn't be able to act out the rest of the scene. Therefore, under Sulen's arrangements, they naturally pretended to be bribed by these nobles. After the Reformation, the military system in San Filto City was very strict. There was a strict limit to the number of private soldiers the nobles could have. Even the weapons and armors they could have were limited. Normal swords were not prohibited, but bows and armors were not allowed. However, this was not a problem for the nobles. After all, many nobles had blacksmiths at home. Although they didn't have a lot of armors, they could still gather a few dozen sets. With this army and some ordinary citizens, they could easily pull out tens of thousands of soldiers. It was enough to take down San Filto city, which was empty of soldiers. The large army gathered, and then there were spies who came to the city gate. Countless soldiers quickly surrounded the palace. The north wind whistled and night fell. However, the city was brightly lit. Soldiers holding torches poured out of the city. The shining swords reflected their ferocious and distorted faces. The citizens in the city had already shut their doors and trembled as they watched through the cracks of their doors. They were afraid that these soldiers would rush into their houses. These soldiers couldn't care less about them now. They all looked at the palace with greedy eyes. This was the king's home. As long as they could break in, they could have all kinds of gold, silver, and jewelry. All kinds of beautiful ladies and rare treasures would be theirs. For this operation, the nobles had put in a lot of effort. Not only did they take out a lot of gold and silver, but they also sent out their powerful subordinates. They were very clear about the strength of Sullan's army. Without powerful knights, it was almost impossible to break in. With a command, the impatient soldiers rushed forward excitedly and tried to take over the palace by force. The flames flickered and the sounds of fighting shook the sky. The entire city fell into a chaotic battle at this moment. Many of the nobles who had participated in the operation were excited beyond words. They brought their subordinates to the palace and were ready to witness the fall of this place that symbolized the king's power. A ray of light descended from the sky. Then a light blue energy barrier rose in the palace. It was like an inverted jade bowl, enveloping the entire palace. Seeing this scene, the nobles suddenly felt a sense of unease. Although they weren't wizards, they could clearly recognize that this was a spell that only those mysterious wizards could cast. The entire night sky was illuminated by this gorgeous energy barrier, but the nobles' faces turned pale. How could this spell be broken? At this moment, there were waves of killing sounds coming from behind. The soldiers at the back cried and fled in panic. They were no longer as arrogant and domineering as before. Those who fell behind were directly beheaded. These soldiers only hated that their parents didn't give birth to them with 2 more legs. At the same time, the palace gates suddenly opened. Groups of soldiers rushed out of the palace. There were barbarians, dwarves, and even half-elves. Although there weren't many of them, they directly crushed the army outside. The nobles had nowhere to run and were defeated. Sulan looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He had a strong and slender body, a head full of blonde hair, and a handsome face. Although he was already middle-aged, he looked very charming. He was completely in line with the beauty standards of those noble ladies. Marquis Asser, this should be the first time we've met. Sulan picked up a piece of barbecued meat and took a big bite. He looked at the Medici family head who was tied up and kneeling at the bottom of the steps with a playful expression and said in a frivolous tone. Although he was in a sorry state, Marquis Asser didn't panic. He still looked elegant. Your Majesty Sulan, I am a noble, and I am the Emperor's chosen Marquis of Florence. I request to be treated according to my status. The way you treat me is completely unbefitting of a noble. Oh, now you know that you are a noble of the Kingdom of Florence. A Marquis of the Emperor's chosen Marquis. What a great noble! Sulan said in an exaggerated tone. But why is a great noble like you, a Marquis of the Emperor's chosen Marquis, kneeling here? Sulan said with a mocking expression. Don't you know in your heart? You have already rebelled, and you still think that you are a noble of the Kingdom of Florence? You want to be treated like a noble? You want to eat sh*t? Your Majesty Sulan, according to the noble inheritance law, you are not a direct descendant of the Henry royal family. You have no right to inherit at all. According to the inheritance law, as a Marquis of the Emperor's chosen Marquis, I have the right to inherit the throne, so you are kneeling here. Sulan interrupted him directly. In the battle that day, the army of 100,000 was just for show. They were almost defeated in front of Sullan's rebel army. As the commander-in-chief, he was taken special care of. When he escaped, there was a stupid guard who followed him all the way with a flag, completely exposing his route. In the end, he was caught by the enemy before he could run far. After all, the army he led was not tempered by war at all. They were not strong enough. After encountering the elites of the northern city, they were completely suppressed. If it was a defensive battle, they might be able to hold on for a while with the help of the city wall. However, in a wild battle, they were all wiped out in one battle. From noon to night, the defeated army was everywhere in the mountains. After the battle, the army of 100,000 disappeared. Among them, there were at least 50, if not 100, nobles who were captured. Who asked these nobles to rely on their numbers? They thought that the other side was short of food, so they all dressed up in gaudy clothes. They wanted to show off their heroism after the victory, but in the end, they dressed too extravagantly and became targets on the battlefield. Since you want to be treated as a noble, it is not impossible. Sulen put down the barbecue and took the towel from the guard to wipe his hands. According to your title, how much kinnar do you need to pay to be treated as a noble? 200,000 kinnar, Asser said with a painful expression. What are you waiting for? Let go of Marquis Asser. Sulen yelled at the two soldiers beside him. Look at how tight the rope is. Hurry up and untie him. Our Marquis Asser has never suffered like this before. How can you be so careless? The two soldiers beside him quickly untied the ropes on Asser's body. Marquis Asser has suffered. It's all our fault. Sulen looked at Marquis Asser with a smile, like he was looking at a mountain of gold. Chapter 473. With Isis as an example, the rest of the nobles expressed their willingness to pay the ransom. After a rough calculation, Sulen received a shocking number. The total ransom of these nobles was almost 5 million kinnar. However, Sulen did not plan to let them go so easily. He asked these nobles to write letters to their families to send the ransom. After receiving these letters, the nobles who were still trembling in fear heaved a sigh of relief. As long as they accepted the ransom, it would be easy. Although they had to pay a large sum of money, it was still better than being accused of rebellion and stripped of their titles. They immediately opened their treasure vaults and took out a large amount of kinnar to pay the ransom. Soon, Sulen's camp received a shocking amount of kinnar. After receiving the ransom, Sulen did not immediately release the nobles. He did not plan to let these rebels go so easily. Moreover, these fertile lands in the south were too cheap for them. It was better for him to take control of them. Therefore, after the nobles paid the ransom and let their guard down, Sulen's army quietly spread out to the surrounding cities and attacked at the agreed time. The soldiers suffered heavy losses. Under the lack of vigilance, more than 10 southern cities were conquered overnight. Sulen completely bared his fangs. However, although he had conquered more than 10 cities, there were more cities in the south that were still controlled by the rebels. However, the combat power of Sulen's army had completely shocked these people. They did not dare to attack again. Because Sulen did not have enough soldiers, conquering more than 10 cities was already the limit. Therefore, he did not launch another attack. Instead, he took the opportunity to quickly digest the spoils of war that he had just received. At the same time, Sulen took out the ransom that he had just received and began to recruit soldiers again. While recruiting, Sulen began to transfer more soldiers from the northern city. The northern city had more than 10,000 soldiers before, but after a few transfers, there were less than 5,000 soldiers left. More than half of them were new soldiers. The rest of the soldiers were sent to San Filto through the teleportation circle. The rebellion in San Filto had ended long ago. The rebellion that the nobles had prepared did not cause any waves at all. Whether it was the nobles' private soldiers, recruited soldiers, or even bribed soldiers, they were all defeated in one blow. The nobles who participated in the rebellion were all driven crazy by the well-prepared embroidered uniform guards. For a time, the prisons in the city were overcrowded. With so many nobles captured, all sorts of confessions were interrogated by the embroidered uniform guards. The culprit, who had been hiding under the water, could no longer hide and was quickly captured. This time, about half of the nobles in the Kingdom of Florence were directly implicated. In addition to arresting people, they also obtained a lot of money and land. At the same time, the power of the nobles was also dealt a blow by Sulen. After this incident, the number of nobles in the Kingdom of Florence was reduced by half. The influence of the nobles was greatly weakened. Moreover, those who dared to resist were mostly captured. The remaining ones were all very obedient. Apart from that, Sulen had also begun to promulgate laws that restricted the rights of the nobles. Although the laws did not completely eliminate the nobles, it was impossible for them to be as powerful as before. Sulen dealt with these people very decisively. Needless to say, those who were deeply involved were directly stripped of their titles. The main culprit was sentenced to death by hanging. As for those who were implicated, all their property was confiscated and they were punished to be slaves. When spring came next year, they would be sent to work in the northern town city. This incident could implicate at least tens of thousands of people and send them to the northern town city. With these people, the rapid development of the northern town city was already a matter of certainty. Just as Sulen was digesting the spoils of war, the rebellious nobles in the south began to send messengers to negotiate. These people had already realized the gap between them and Sulen. After being beaten up, they also woke up. This negotiation was to admit defeat. If they continued to fight, although they could win, it would take a lot of time. Another reason was that several countries bordering the south of Florence had recently begun to stir. If Sulen pressed too hard, who knew if these nobles would directly cooperate with the surrounding countries? By then, things would be troublesome. Therefore, after some consideration, Sulen decided to negotiate, but the requirements of the negotiation were much stricter. At the very least, these nobles had to pay a heavy price. After handing over the peace negotiations, Sulen also returned to Sanfilto city. After the war of 100,000 people ended, Sulen heard the system prompt sound in his ears. Congratulations, host. You have won a glorious victory. Under your command, your army has defeated the southern rebel army despite being outnumbered. At the same time, you have suppressed the rebel army within the royal city. You have obtained 63,000 EXP. You have obtained 1 platinum treasure chest. You have obtained 3 rubies. Battle ended, January 1689 of the new moon calendar. In the Kingdom of Florence, the nobles in the capital who were dissatisfied with you colluded with the nobles in the south and started a great rebellion. You and your army fought calmly and successfully crushed the enemy's scheme. You have also defeated the rebels in the south in the field, obtaining victory in the entire battle and forcing the other nobles in the south to submit to you. Your name has started to spread in the surrounding countries. Prestige plus 15. Hearing the notifications of his attributes, Sulen opened up his storage space. This time around, he had only received a platinum treasure chest and a few magic gemstones. His gains could only be said to be better than nothing. However, the enemies this time around were not strong enough. They did not even have a single legend, and the strongest were merely conferred knights and knight commanders. The 60,000 experience points were only given due to the fact that there were enough enemies this time around. Fang Xingjian casually opened the platinum treasure chest, and a series of beautiful special effects flashed by. The system's cold voice rang out in his ears. Congratulations, host. You have opened the platinum treasure chest. You have received the item demonized oak tree seed. A strange seed appeared before his eyes. Sulen picked it up. This seed was about the size of a walnut and was silvery white in color. There were some strange patterns on the surface of the seed, and it looked very beautiful. With one look, Fang Xingjian could tell that this seed was no ordinary item. Demonized oak tree, plant. This is a strange seed that requires a special environment in order for it to take root and germinate. After that, it will grow and become a demonized oak tree. The demonized oak tree possesses mysterious powers. Host, please explore on your own. Explore on my own? What the heck? Sulen looked back and forth at the silver-white seed in front of him, which was surrounded by a layer of strange power, protecting the seed from harm. The result of the system's identification was also vague. Sulan was also curious about this seed. However, there was nothing he could do about it now. If he wanted to plant this seed, he would need to find a suitable place. Ordinary places would not allow it to germinate. Sulan gave it some thought and kept the seed. He planned to send the seed to the secret realm to test it out after returning to northern Garrison City. After staying in San Filto City for 2 days, Sulan brought Phyllis along to have a deep and simple conversation. After that, he went to northern Garrison City in a carefree mood. The biggest harvest this time, other than a dozen cities, was a large amount of kinnar. This time, Sulan obtained a total of 10 million kinnar. With so many kinnar, it greatly alleviated northern Garrison City's financial problems. Moreover, Sulan was also preparing to continue building the miracle building. Last time, he obtained the Chelan horn. He already had the blueprint for the Chelan pavilion. However, he did not have enough funds at that time. Now that he had the funds, he could buy all kinds of materials. Therefore, the Chelan pavilion could also be built. The location that Sulan chose for the Chelan pavilion was near the military camp. The terrain here was broad. After confirming the location, Northern Garrison City's huge construction team immediately began to work. All kinds of materials and building materials were continuously transported over. After that, construction began under Sullen's command. The Chelan pavilion did not occupy a large area. However, the attic's shape was grand and imposing. It used a large amount of high-quality wood. This was a 3-story brick attic. The attic was richly ornamented. On top of it, there were many carvings of rare beasts. Fortunately, Northern Garrison City's craftsmen were all experienced masters. Otherwise, this kind of attic might not be able to be completed. After handing over the blueprint to the construction leader, Sulan left the construction site. He brought the demonized oak tree seed to Northern Wind Pagoda. Sulan went straight to the astrology platform in the pagoda. When he arrived at the astrology platform, Hathaway was reclining on a reclining chair and flipping through a magic book. After seeing Sulan arrive, her face revealed a trace of joy. However, it quickly disappeared. "How come you have time to come here today?" Hathaway put down the book and raised her head to take a look at him. The corner of her mouth revealed a trace of a tranquil smile. Her eyes moved and her rosy cherry lips lightly opened. Sulan shrugged his shoulders and very casually sat on the reclining chair. Hathaway's beautiful big eyes rolled her eyes at him. After that, she leaned her body to the side and made some space for him. Sulan comfortably leaned against her and sat down. Although the chaise lounge was rather spacious, it was still a bit crowded when 2 people sat on it. A burst of male scent assaulted her face. Although she was already very familiar with it, Hathaway's face still flashed with a trace of blush. Sulan sniffed the faint delicate fragrance that came from the tip of his nose. He felt the astonishing elasticity and softness of her body. Hathaway's body carried a delicate fragrance. Her soft long hair casually draped down. Her white as jade-like skin was as delicate as a baby's. As if sensing Sulan's gaze, some small goosebumps slowly appeared on Hathaway's arms. After a while, Sulan withdrew his gaze. Then, he took out an exquisite box and lowered it in front of Hathaway. "I obtained a strange seed this time. Take a look and see if it's useful," Sulan said close to Hathaway's ear. He opened the box and revealed the silver seed inside. His scorching breath blew on the side of her face and earrings. Hathaway's white as jade-like skin also slowly rose a little bit. Sulan stared at the woman with astonishing attractiveness and seduction in front of him. A mischievous smile appeared on his face. Chapter 474. A silver ray of light shone and appeared. The silver enchanted seed reflected a beautiful light. Even the most knowledgeable witches were attracted by this strange seed. "What kind of seed is this?" Hathaway reached out and picked up the seed. "It is said to be the seed of an enchanted oak tree." Sulan stretched his body, raised his arm, and dropped it. Naturally, it went through Hathaway's back and reached her waist. Hathaway's body trembled slightly, but she did not reject it. She continued to look down at the seed. Sulen wrapped his arm around Hathaway's slender waist and pulled her tall body into his arms. Hathaway rolled her eyes at him and continued to look at the enchanted seed. This seed has a strong vitality, Hathaway said in surprise after she sent her magic power into it to examine it. It's just a little strange. There is a layer of energy field on the surface of this seed. Before this energy field dissipates, it can't be planted. Sulen said, this layer of energy field has a chance to disappear when the seed is in a suitable place. I plan to plant this seed in the secret realm. What do you think? I just tested it. This seed is not dangerous. As long as we are careful, there won't be any big problems. But I suggest that we isolate it first. Hathaway's cheeks were flushed. Sulen's warm palm slowly climbed up like a snake. His fingertips brushed across Hathaway's smooth and soft skin. He could feel the temperature of Hathaway's body rising, and the delicate fragrance of her body was getting stronger. At the same time, he inadvertently licked her small and cute earlobe. Phew. Hathaway's breathing was obviously a little faster, and her eyes seemed to become like a pool of spring water at this moment. Although her eyes fell on the silver seed in her hand, she seemed to be absent-minded. Sulen's palm slid upward. His fingers crossed the plane and soon began to climb the peak. Hathaway felt her body getting hotter and hotter, and her breathing became faster. At this moment, Hathaway's breathing suddenly stopped. Sulen's palm was holding a soft peach. The touch was smoother than silk and as gentle as jade. He loved it so much that he could not put it down. The steering wheel was kneaded into various shapes. Sulen used his arm to directly carry Hathaway's light body. Then, he walked into a room at the side. Soon, a burst of sobbing sounds floated out from the astrology platform. Sulen's purple lightning thunder dragon spear swept through thousands of troops with unparalleled penetrative power. Hathaway's protective shield collapsed under this kind of attack. However, facing Sulen's rapid advance, Hathaway did not give up resisting. She also began to resist with the wizard's hand. However, how could it withstand the giant tongue whip? Sulen brought out his specialty, the 7 snakes coiling spear. He quickly charged 3 times without any cooldown time, and then violently attacked with the Overlord's spear rush. Even legendary spellcasters were beaten to a pulp. After activating their ultimate move, they were invincible. Then, it was an earth-shattering battle of tens of thousands of words. In the end, Sulen won a complete victory. Early the next morning, Sulen brought Hathaway back to the secret realm. The secret realm was still full of flowers, and there were no changes due to the wind and snow outside. Groups of winged ones were busy in the flower field not far away. On the other side, a few clay golems were working. The whole secret realm was full of vitality. The secret realm produced a lot of magic materials every month. However, because of the lack of manpower, there were still many places in the secret realm that had not been repaired. Many of the planting areas were still barren. The operation of a secret realm required a lot of manpower. The work in the secret realm was dangerous. Without a certain level of strength, it was impossible to do it. At the same time, some magic knowledge and the ability to cast spells were needed. With Sulen's current foundation, he could not do it. Sulen and Hathaway came to the control center of the secret realm. He asked Tower Spirit Number 1 to display a 3-dimensional map of the entire secret realm. He was going to mark out a piece of land in the secret realm and use it to plant the enchanted oak. With the help of Tower Spirit Number 1, Sulen quickly chose a place. The area of the land was neither big nor small. It was about 1,000 square meters. The surrounding area had been isolated by a spatial isolation circle. At the same time, there was an energy channel connected to the elemental pool to provide enough energy. Sulen deliberately built a small pool here. The water in it was the energy water that was drawn from the elemental pool. After the planting environment was ready, Sulen took out the silver seed. After injecting energy into the seed, he put the seed in the pool. After the seed entered the spring water, the strange energy field that shrouded the seed quickly dissipated. Then, to Su Luan's surprise, the seed that had just sprouted grew uncontrollably. The seed buds broke out of the soil and grew rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it became a small sapling. Then, the elemental water in the pool was consumed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few seconds, the elemental water in the pool was exhausted. Seeing this, Su Len immediately ordered Tower Spirit No. 1 to open the energy channel. Soon, the blue elemental water poured into the pool. With the influx of elemental water, the sapling grew rapidly again. In just a few minutes, the sapling grew into a tree more than 10 meters tall. At this time, the growth of the oak tree finally began to slow down. However, even though it had slowed down a little, its growth rate was still dozens of times faster than its normal growth rate. In the next few days, with the energy supply from the elemental pool, the oak finally grew to about 20 meters tall. Its branches and leaves were lush and green. A strange energy appeared around the demonized oak tree. This energy was somewhat different from mana. It was gentler and purer, with a natural aura. This aura made people feel very comfortable. Although it had grown to more than 20 meters, the oak was still not mature. However, its growth rate had returned to normal. It could only grow slowly. This is a nature oak. Hathaway looked at the tree in front of her in surprise. Nature oak? What's that? Su Len looked at Hathaway in confusion. The nature oak is a magical plant cultivated by the elves. Hathaway reached out and enchanted the trunk of the oak. She continued, "You should have heard of the legend of the Tree of Life or the World Tree, right?" "Of course I have. The World Tree is said to be the divine tree that created the world. The Tree of Life is the treasure of the High Elves." "You mean this tree is?" Su Len immediately understood. "What are you thinking about?" Hathaway rolled her eyes at Su Len. She continued, "Not to mention the World Tree, even the Tree of Life can't grow in a space like the Arcana realm. The World Tree is a divine object that only exists in legends. No one has ever seen it before. Legend has it that the Tree of Life grows in the ancestral land of the elves. Other than a few gold elves among the high elves, no other elves can get close to it, let alone us. The World Tree was said to have been destroyed during the War of the Gods. It was cut down by the gods, leaving only some withered branches and leaves, which were taken away by some people. The Tree of Life was very precious. The High Elves had always wanted to plant one, but they had never succeeded. Later, the High Elves began to use the branches of the Tree of Life and other trees to cultivate. It was said that some of the branches of the World Tree were also used. This method of cultivation eventually succeeded, but it also failed. The newly cultivated plants were not as powerful as the elves had expected. Although they inherited a part of it, they were severely weakened in all aspects. The nature oak could change the surrounding environment and make it more habitable. At the same time, it could purify corrosion and increase the concentration of natural energy. Although it was not as good as the Tree of Life, many elven villages would plant one. Elven villages would also be built around nature oaks. During the Elven Empire, every elven village would have a nature oak. After the Elven Empire collapsed, many nature oaks were cut down and burned. Although the nature oak was not as powerful as the World Tree, it still inherited some of the World Tree's abilities. For example, it could form a nature domain around itself. Casting nature spells or druid spells here would be enhanced. Su Len did not expect this seed to be a nature oak. Since the Elven Empire was destroyed, many nature oaks were destroyed. This plant was very precious among the elves. Now, there was one growing in the Arcana realm. Nature oak. Legend has it that the branches of the World Tree and the Tree of Life were used to cultivate an advanced plant. It was widely planted throughout the continent during the Elven Empire. It has the effect of purifying the environment and improving nature. Energy purification plus 35. Nature Force plus 33, Nature Domain plus 10, Health Growth plus 18, Bloodline Evolution plus 6, only applicable to nature elemental creatures, environment compatibility +33. Su Len was a bit surprised after seeing the nature oak's attributes. This kind of nature oak could promote bloodline evolution. No wonder the elves planted it in every village. At the beginning, the ancient elves' bloodline was the same as the dragons, which was the golden bloodline. However, as time passed, their bloodline began to deteriorate. For example, the normal elves' bloodline had already deteriorated to bronze, which was not much different from a human's bloodline. However, with this nature oak, their bloodline would slowly improve. Although it would be difficult to evolve, at least it would not continue to deteriorate. This was very important to the elves. However, this bloodline evolution was only limited to nature elemental creatures. In the northern city, only the half-elves and Pegasi met this requirement. Chapter 475. Bloodline evolution was a rare ability. The nature oak's ability was only effective on elves and half-elves. It had limited effect on Su Len. As for letting the half-elves live here, Su Len planned to use it as a reward. Only the half-elves who had made great contributions could live here. With this nature oak, the half-elves' loyalty to Su Len would increase again. Su Len believed that the half-elves would work hard for a long time. As the nature breath on the oak spread, Su Len and Hathaway felt some changes in their bodies. Although Su Len had successfully merged with the divinity after absorbing it last time, the pollution in the divinity was not completely removed. The divinity of the brain hunter contained a large amount of evil, madness, lust, violence, and destruction. It could easily interfere with one's mind. After Sullen's methods, most of these negative energies had been removed. According to the original speed, it would take at least half a month to remove all the pollution. But just now, all the pollution in his body had been cleansed. Feeling the changes in his body, Sullen's eyes flashed with joy. The nature oak could actually cleanse the pollution in his body. This was great news for Su Len. With the purification effect of the nature oak, he could continue to extract the remaining divinity of the brain hunter. This purification effect was not only effective on Su Len, but also on Hathaway. As a wizard, Hathaway had taken many potions. Some of these potions were used to heal injuries, while others were used to increase strength. Normal potions had side effects, not to mention this kind of potion. Although the side effects had been reduced to a very low level after Hathaway's treatment, there were still a lot of side effects accumulated in her body over the years. This kind of poison caused the energy in her body to not be pure enough. Basically, all wizards had this problem. Now, the poison in Hathaway's body had been completely cleansed. As a legendary wizard, Hathaway was very sensitive to the changes in her body. Soon, she felt that her body had become more pure. Su Len and Hathaway waited for a while before leaving the secret realm and returning to the North Wind Tower. After Su Len returned, he hurriedly took out the divine crystal of the brain hunter sealed in the wizard tower. He was ready to extract the divinity from it again. After taking out the divine crystal, Su Len and Hathaway came to the astrology platform. They were very familiar with extracting divinity. They directly connected the galaxy to the elemental pool, and powerful elemental energy instantly appeared on the astrology platform. At this time, the rune circle under their feet also lit up. Hathaway gently waved her hand, and a delicate magic staff appeared in her hand. Seal. Rise. Along with the huge energy, a mighty torrent of magic power appeared. Hathaway's figure was lifted into the air by this power, and a silver chain quickly formed. At this time, Su Len also took out the divine crystal. With a light flick of his finger, the divine crystal fell into the seal. Hathaway nodded at Su Len. Su Len took a deep breath and stood on another rune circle. The huge elemental energy was instantly activated, and the rune circle lit up. Soul extraction. In an instant, the powerful elemental energy turned into chains and sank into the divine crystal. Then, a huge energy burst out. The chains slowly pulled and dragged the soul of the brain hunter out of the divine crystal. The ferocious-looking brain hunter was dragged out little by little. The brain hunter struggled to escape, but as soon as it moved, more rune chains wrapped around it and completely suppressed it. Soul extraction. A purple-brown soul energy was extracted and then integrated into Sullen's body. It contained the soul energy and divinity of the brain hunter. Sulen calmed his mind, extracted the soul energy, and resealed it. Then, he integrated the divinity into his body. As the soul energy was extracted, the soul of the brain hunter began to become more transparent. At the same time, a trace of pale golden energy began to slowly enter Sullen's body. The original divinity in Sullen's body was also stimulated at this moment, guiding the divinity into his body. A trace of pale golden appeared in Sullen's blood, and even the divinity in his soul became more radiant. As the divinity was integrated bit by bit, Sulen quickly felt bloated again. When he felt that the divinity was absorbed to the peak, Sulen directly stopped the soul extraction. At this time, the originally solid soul of the brain hunter had become faintly discernible. After 2 extractions, the soul of the brain hunter had become very weak. There was only a little divinity left. The soul crystal that Sulen used to preserve the soul energy of the brain hunter had also become legendary. As long as the remaining soul energy was integrated, the soul crystal would become advanced legendary. Hathaway skillfully used the demon sealing formation to reseal the divine crystal. Sulen also came to the seclusion room and began to remove the evil energy. At the same time, he removed the various negative thoughts in the divinity. When he came out of the seclusion room, the negative energy in his body was very faint. The remaining polluted energy needed to be slowly removed. The last stubborn energy would be purified by the nature oak in the secret realm. After integrating the divinity, Sulen had 9 points of divinity. He was only 1 step away from becoming a demigod. After stretching his body, Sulen left the Northern Wind Tower and went to the Chilan Pavilion in the northern town to inspect. The Chilan Pavilion did not occupy a large area. After a long period of training, the workers in the northern town had rich experience and superb skills. It was not difficult to build the Chilan Pavilion. After inspecting it and finding no problems, Sulen left with satisfaction. Speaking of the buildings in the northern town, the Chilan Pavilion occupied the smallest area and was also the easiest to build. According to the progress of the project, it would be completed in about a week. After inspecting the city, Sulen returned to the palace. During this period of time, there were many things to do. The rebels in the south were still negotiating, and the rebels in the northern town of Cold Wind were finally coming to an end. Originally, after the rebels lost 5 high-grade wizards, the Marquis of Savoy had broken through the pass. However, at this time, snow had started to fall in the northern town. It was very difficult to move again in such weather. As a result, the time was delayed for a while, and finally, Coldwind City was completely taken care of. Alex and Karina also returned to Northgard City after completing their quests. After resting in the northern town for 2 days, Sulen decided to build an obsidian workshop. The production of obsidian required magma, which was very common in areas with frequent volcanoes. However, there were no volcanoes in the northern town. After thinking for a while, he decided to go to the fire elemental plane to capture 2 magma elementals. The temperature in the fire elemental plane was very high. Ordinary people could not survive for more than a minute. The temperature in the fire elemental plane was the lowest. Many things were needed to survive in such a harsh environment. After hearing that Sulen wanted to go to the fire elemental plane, Hathaway spent a lot of time and elves to make a high-grade fire-resistant ring. Interplanar travel was not easy. Sulen was only a high-grade wizard, so he could not travel between planes. However, Hathaway was already a legendary wizard. With Hathaway's power, he could also travel between planes. The environment in the fire elemental plane was very harsh. It was very dangerous for anyone below the legendary rank to enter, so this time only Sulen went. Hathaway made an interplanar teleportation circle in the astrology station to connect to the fire elemental plane. Through this planar teleportation array, Sulen could be teleported to the fire elemental plane. At the same time, this planar teleportation array had a time limit. The return coordinates had been set at the same time as the teleportation array. As long as the time was up or Su Luan wanted to return, he could directly activate the spatial coordinates left on him and be teleported back by the planar teleportation array. After a few days, all the preparations were done. Hathaway and Su Len came to the astrology station, where the interplanar teleportation circle was ready. Su Len took a deep breath, stood in the center of the teleportation circle, and nodded to Hathaway. Hathaway took out her magic staff and gently tapped it on the ground. A powerful elemental energy instantly poured into the teleportation circle through the energy channel. The powerful energy tore the space apart, and a portal appeared in front of them. Su Len cast a few defensive spells on himself and walked into the portal. The dazzling light of teleportation rose, and Sullen's figure disappeared in front of them. Su Len only felt a strong sense of dizziness, and then his eyes lit up. A wave of heat washed over him, and all he could see was fiery red. The sky, the earth, and the mountains were all burning with fire. Everything in the fire elemental plane was shining with fire. The ground was nothing more than flattened flames and ashes, and the air was restless from the erupting firestorms. The most common liquid was lava, not water. Oceans were formed by flowing flames, and mountains were leaking lava. The first time he came to the fire elemental plane, Su Len felt an intense burning sensation. Although he had already cast a few spells on himself and had a high-grade fire resistance ring, he still couldn't completely resist the high temperature. Just the outermost layer of the fire elemental plane had a temperature of 800 degrees. Ordinary people would directly burn to death if they came here, and most things in the material world would directly burn if they came here. And in the depths of the fire elemental plane, it was normal for the temperature to reach tens of thousands of degrees. Even steel would become as soft as mud and would quickly melt when it was brought here. Ordinary weapons couldn't be used here, and the temperature was very high. Directly breathing would cook the respiratory tract and lungs. Moreover, the air was full of poisonous gases, so they could only use wind elemental power to breathe. Chapter 476. Although he was buffed by all kinds of spells, the surrounding environment was still scorching hot. The surrounding fire elements were rich to an astonishing degree, while the water elements were almost non-existent. In such an environment, using fire elemental spells would yield twice the result with half the effort, but using water elemental spells would consume several times more mana, and their power would also weaken. Just as Su Len arrived in this world, a few fire elementals roaming in the surroundings rushed towards Su Len. Fire elementals were the most irascible of the four elements, and these low-level fire elementals were simple-minded and filled with the desire to destroy. Their only purpose was to set everything on fire. Seeing these 4 to 5 meter tall fire elementals rushing over, Su Len waved his hand and took out the storm war halberd. In the fire elemental plane, the strength of fire elementals would increase, and the most direct indication was their size. In a material plane, these low-level fire elementals were around 2 meters tall, but in this place, they were generally around 4 meters tall. The storm war halberd was covered in lightning, leaving behind afterimages as it instantly hit the cores of the surrounding fire elementals. The fire elementals let out howls of grief as they directly dissipated. A few fire elemental crystals fell down, and Su Len caught them. The drop rate of elemental crystals here was much higher than in the material plane. The fire elemental plane didn't only have elemental lifeforms, there were also a large number of foreign lifeforms living here, such as fire lizards, fire dwarves, fire crows, and so on. The most powerful among them were the fire deities. The fire deities had built a huge city here, the Brass City. This city floated above a sea of fire, and not only did the fire deities live in this city, but there were also a large number of slaves. Escaping here was basically impossible, because only the magic of the fire deities could protect these slaves from being harmed by the flames. In the fire elemental plane, the continent floated above the lava, and large and small fire deity villages could be seen everywhere on the sea of lava. Moreover, there were also gods living in this plane. The fire elemental god and the fire god both lived here. One of them was located in the hottest place of the fire elemental plane, while the other lived in the Coke Temple. The common languages of this world were the fire elemental plane, the common language, and the inferno language. Walking in the fire elemental plane was like walking on burning flames. Most of the land was solid, but there were also some flaming swamps that were similar to asphalt and highly sticky. The most troublesome of all were the lava fountains, which appeared completely randomly. Apart from that, the fire elemental plane also had a rain of ashes. Countless burning flames would fall from the sky, and without any defensive spells, even a great night wouldn't last more than a few minutes. Other than that, there was also a volcano that could erupt at any time. Although this place was very dangerous, it was rich in all kinds of fire attribute materials. For example, elemental crystal stones, fire essence, fire copper ore, and so on could be found here. Croak. Accompanied by an unpleasant cry, a red cloud flew over from afar. Sulen took a closer look and found that the red cloud was actually a flock of fire crows. When they saw Sulen, they flew towards Sulen with burning flames. Food was scarce in the fire elemental plane. It was clear that these fire crows had taken Sulen as their prey. Quintuple lightning whip. Crackling lightning jumped out of Sulen's hands, and a whip made of lightning swept through the air. Wherever it passed, a large number of fire crows fell down like rain. These fire crows weren't very powerful, and they relied on their numbers to win. But it was clear that they had found the wrong opponent this time. The quintuple lightning whip swept through the sky, crisscrossing lightning bolts weaved into a huge electric net. All the fire crows were covered by this electric net, and it only took a few moments for the flock of fire crows to be wiped out. Fire crows didn't have any precious materials on them, so Sulen chose a few high-quality fire crows and put them in his storage space. He then didn't stay any longer and immediately left. The elemental fluctuations there would soon attract more monsters, and fire crows were considered good food for many monsters. If he stayed any longer, he would likely be entangled by those monsters. Sulen had come to look for lava elementals, so he didn't want to waste too much time here. After identifying the direction, Sulen's figure flashed and he quickly left. Rumble. A series of fireballs exploded, and Sulen's body flashed with light. He disappeared and reappeared dozens of meters away, dodging the attacks behind him. Why are there so many monsters? Sulen killed 3 fire lizards with a headache. It had only been a morning since he arrived, and Sulen had encountered dozens of waves of monsters. As soon as these monsters saw Sulen, they began to attack without saying a word. Since he came to this plane, the battle hadn't stopped. This fire elemental plane is really unfriendly. Sulen frowned. In fact, Sulen didn't know that the aura on his body that didn't belong to the fire elemental plane had attracted the interest of these monsters. This was something only high-grade wizards who had traveled through planes would know. He was a first-time traveler, and Hathaway didn't have this experience, so no one told him. Casually putting away the corpses of these fire lizards, Sulen looked at the surrounding environment. This can't go on. Although his strength was not bad, in an environment like the fire elemental plane, he had to consume energy all the time. His recovery speed couldn't keep up with the consumption. If he didn't wear the danger tungsten on his body, his situation would be even worse. An exquisite glass lantern appeared in his palm. Immediately after, a wave of energy spread out from the glass lantern. Invisibility. Sulen's figure disappeared in an instant. Vanish. Another light rose, and the footprints and smell left behind by Sulen gradually faded until they completely disappeared. After concealing his tracks, Sulen continued to move forward. As expected, after concealing his tracks, no more monsters attacked him. At the same time, he released all his senses and deliberately avoided areas with dense fire elements. Sulen didn't go to the city of brass. Although this city was a neutral city, it didn't mean that everyone was welcome. Sulen didn't have any friendship with the fire deity, so he didn't go there. After using fly, Sulen quickly flew through the sky. The sky of the fire elemental plane was not empty. Clouds of fire floated in the sky. These clouds were composed of flammable gas mixed with a large amount of poisonous gas and smoke. Sometimes, these clouds of fire would suddenly explode, and the scene was as gorgeous as a big firework. These clouds of fire were very dangerous. The temperature inside was very high, and if one accidentally entered, one would be roasted. When flying in the fire elemental plane, remember not to enter these clouds of fire, unless you want to set off fireworks. Sullen's target was the area of the fire elemental plane near the earth elemental plane. This area was an almost endless sea of magma. This area was also very dangerous. Magma flowed everywhere, and some black rocks floated on it. Magma waves could be set off at any time anywhere. This was an area with high magma activity. At the same time, it was the border of the elemental plane. The probability of encountering a legendary elemental elder was very high. In the elemental plane, the elemental elder was far more powerful than in the material plane. In the material plane, the challenge rating of an elemental elder was level 16, but in the fire elemental plane, it was level 20. Moreover, their summoning skills were not restricted in the fire elemental plane. If he had enough time, he could summon a fire elemental army. In addition to the elemental elder, there were a large number of elemental lords and demigod jinns. The lowest challenge rating of these creatures was High Legend. If you encountered these creatures in the fire elemental plane, don't think too much. Turning around and running away was the best choice. The creatures in the fire elemental plane were generally very aggressive. According to the division of camps, many creatures in the fire elemental plane lean towards the evil and chaotic camp. If you encountered a demigod jinn in the fire elemental plane, up to 90% of the cases would be a fight. The friendliest elemental jinn were the jinn. They often traded with plane travelers. Of course, this friendliness was also relative. Sulan did not go too deep into the magma sea. It was very dangerous. As the border area between the fire elemental plane and the earth elemental plane, there were usually powerful elemental demigods or elemental lords guarding it. He intended to look for a few large magma elementals nearby and catch them back. In fact, the best place to catch magma elementals was in the magma plane, but this kind of subplane was not so easy to find. There were also a large number of subplanes around the 4 major elemental planes. These planes were in the crevices of various planes, such as the magma plane, the lightning plane, the ice plane, the swamp plane, the steam plane, the smoke plane, the ore plane, and so on. The most valuable one was the ore plane, but the ore plane was very rare and difficult to find. The ore plane had all kinds of ores in the multiverse. It was said that in the ore plane, there were even veins of fine gold and mithril. Veins that existed completely in the form of ores were not associated with ores that needed complicated purification processes. Once this kind of plane was discovered, it was basically a windfall. Sulan flew near the magma sea and observed. After sensing the aura of creatures such as elemental elders, elemental lords, or demigods, he directly went around. Fortunately, there were not many of these creatures, and they were sleeping most of the time. As long as he did not get too close, he would not disturb them. Far away from a magma waterfall, a fire elemental lord was bathing under the magma waterfall. Sulan used the system to identify it and found that the challenge level of this fire elemental lord was as high as level 35. After Sulan looked from afar, he decisively went around it. In the fire elemental plane, if you wanted to challenge them, you would need at least a few high-grade legendary masters in a team. Chapter 477. After bypassing the elemental lord's territory, Sulan soon discovered a lava river. This lava river was about 300 meters wide and was filled with turbulent lava. In some places, the sea of lava was swirling. Some sulfur ores and black stones floated on the surface of the lava. There were also some ashes floating on the surface of the lava. On the lava river, there were many lava elementals. Lava elementals were the amalgamation of earth and fire elementals. They were completely composed of lava. Their ranks were the same as other elemental creatures. They were divided into small, medium, large, giant, and elemental elders. If there was a chance, Sulan wanted to capture an elder lava elemental. However, considering the current situation, Su Len decided to capture 2 giant lava elementals. It was very simple to enslave a lava elemental. One just had to brand the enslavement contract on their soul core. However, these lava elementals would not allow one to do as they pleased. Therefore, under normal circumstances, one would have to beat them up first. After controlling them, one would forcibly brand the enslavement contract on their soul core. Seeing the lava elementals, Su Len did not disturb them. After confirming that there were no powerful creatures around, Su Len slowly approached the lava elementals. Soon, he discovered a giant lava elemental wandering on the edge of the lava river. Its entire body exuded blazing heat. From time to time, boiling lava would slide down from its huge body. This lava elemental gently waved its hand and set off a wave of lava several meters high in the lava river. This type of elemental creature was rarely encountered in material planes. Occasionally, one might see some near volcanic craters. However, their size was not too big and could not satisfy Sullen's needs. Ice Orb. With a flash of light, a football-sized ice orb appeared in front of Su Len. As soon as the ice orb appeared, it flew toward the lava elemental like a meteor. Lava elementals were the same as fire elementals. They had high resistance to physical damage. At the same time, they had the burning effect of fire elementals. During battle, lava splashed out from the lava elementals would also cause damage to the enemy. Lava elementals also had splash damage when they attacked. Melee classes would be at a disadvantage when fighting them. However, lava elementals were not without weaknesses. Because their bodies were made of lava, their movement speed was not fast. As long as one was careful of their lava orb attacks, they could be killed with long-range spells. Lava elementals were the same as fire elementals. They were immune to fire damage and had high resistance to earth elemental spells. Their weaknesses were water and ice elementals. Water elemental spells could deal double the damage. After Su Len threw an ice orb, he lured the giant lava elemental over. The giant lava elemental roared and charged at him. Su Len observed the surroundings while he lured the giant lava elemental to the side. Then, he began to cast spells to whittle down the giant lava elemental's health. After the water elemental attacked the lava elemental, some of the lava on its body would fall. At the same time, the flames on its body would weaken. Su Len needed to weaken the lava elemental as much as possible. Of course, he also had to be careful not to use too much force and kill the lava elemental. Su Len kept attacking the lava elemental. As time passed, the lava elemental's injuries became more and more serious. The lava elemental roared again and again, but there was nothing it could do. Although the lava orb attacks were powerful, they were useless if they could not hit the target. Soon, the lava elemental fell into a near-death state. Intimidate. With a flash of light, the lava elemental that was throwing the lava orb instantly stiffened. Sullen's figure flashed and appeared near the lava elemental. Hold monster. Then, a flash of light rose and instantly controlled the giant lava elemental. Then, a strange stone appeared in Sullen's hand. This was a contract stone made by Hathaway. Once crushed, it could cast an enslavement spell that was equivalent to a legendary wizard's. Su Len gently squeezed, and a rune instantly rushed out. The rune directly penetrated the body of the lava elemental in front of him and was branded on the core of the lava elemental's soul. As if it had sensed the danger, the lava elemental's huge body struggled a few times and then stiffened again. The entire lava elemental seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep. After a while, the lava elemental recovered and stood quietly on the spot, waiting for orders. Raise your left foot. Su Len tried to order the lava elemental. The tall lava elemental obediently raised its left foot according to Sullen's request. Raise your right foot again. Giant lava elemental. The lava elemental shook its body, but it still did not raise its right foot. Take 2 steps. The lava elemental's huge body slowly moved 2 steps and then stood aside obediently. Then, Su Len gave it a few more orders, and the lava elemental acted very seriously. Not bad, very obedient. Looking at the lava elemental in front of him, Su Len nodded with satisfaction. He then activated the teleportation coordinates on his body, and a flash of light rose. Su Len guided the teleportation light to cover the lava elemental in front of him. Then, the teleportation light flashed, and the giant lava elemental disappeared in front of him. At the same time, on the astrology platform of the North Wind Tower in the material plane, a giant lava elemental appeared in the planar teleportation circle. After successfully capturing a giant lava elemental, Su Len began to look for the next target. Soon, he found another giant lava elemental. With the previous experience, Su Len was more familiar with capturing lava elemental for the second time. After putting the giant lava elemental into a near-death state, Su Len took out a contract stone again and enslaved the lava elemental. Then, Su Len activated the teleportation coordinates and teleported the lava elemental back to the main material plane. Just as Su Len finished capturing the lava elemental and was about to take the time to collect some ashes from the fire elemental plane, a dull roar suddenly came from afar. Su Len's eyes widened instantly. Is that the roar of a giant dragon? The location of the roar was not close to Su Len. Su Len had heard the roar of a Euron before, and it was very similar to the roar just now. Giant dragons also lived in the elemental planes. Among them, a large number of gem dragons lived in the earth elemental plane. On the other hand, the giant dragons that usually appeared in the fire elemental plane were red dragons. Occasionally, metal dragons would also come here. Usually, it was brass dragons and gold dragons. Of course, metal dragons were rare. The red dragons liked this kind of environment the most. The other two types of giant dragons rarely entered the fire elemental plane. The giant dragons encountered in the elemental plane were a little different from the giant dragons in the outside world. Under normal circumstances, only adult giant dragons would enter the more dangerous elemental plane. All the giant dragons below the adult stage, including the more powerful young giant dragons, were not willing to enter the fire elemental plane. This was because the enemies in the elemental plane were too powerful. Many of them liked to hunt giant dragon creatures. Hearing the roar of a giant dragon here, Su Len's curiosity was instantly piqued. When he thought of the giant dragons, Su Len thought of their huge wealth. Should I go and take a look? Su Len was a little hesitant. He came this time to enslave the lava elemental and collect some rare materials at the same time. He did not have any other plans. Now that he heard the roar of a giant dragon, he wanted to see if he could get some benefits. Of course, there were still some risks. The danger level of the fire elemental plane could be described in a more exaggerated way. There were as many legends as dogs and demigods as there were demigods. Any powerful wild monster had a challenge rating of 10+. If he was unlucky and encountered an elder fire elemental, it would be a legendary battle. With Su Len's current strength, it was definitely impossible to deal with a demigod, but he was confident in dealing with ordinary legendary creatures. And even if he encountered any danger, with Hathaway's planar teleportation, he was confident that he could escape. At most, he would be a little embarrassed. If he found that it was really a giant dragon, then he might be able to make a fortune this time. There were many creatures in the fire elemental plane that could deal with adult giant dragons. Those creatures were irritable. As long as there was a little fire, they would easily fight. Let's go and take a look. If it doesn't work, we'll leave. Su Len clapped his hands and made up his mind. After thinking about it, Su Len once again cast invisibility on himself, and then flew in the direction of the sound. There were not many creatures in the elemental plane that could wrestle with a giant dragon. Fire Jinn, Elder Fire Elemental, Elemental Lord, and so on. These monsters were not easy to deal with, and once he was discovered, it was very likely that they would attack him. After flying over a hill, Su Len saw a volcano not far away. After glancing around, Su Len did not see any trace of a giant dragon. Su Len looked at the volcano. His eyes moved slightly, and Su Len carefully approached the crater of the volcano. This was the most common volcano in the fire elemental plane. Scorching magma was rolling inside, and a lot of black smoke was coming out of the magma mouth. The scene inside the crater could not be seen clearly. The crater of the volcano was about 500 meters in diameter. It was a small volcano in the fire elemental plane. Su-Len had seen a volcanic eruption of more than 20 kilometers here before. A large amount of magma smoke rushed into the sky. It was like the end of the world. If it was really a giant dragon in this environment, then there was no need to guess that it was a red dragon. Only red dragons would like this magma environment. Su-Len came near the crater of the volcano, and then carefully entered it. Just as he went deeper, he suddenly stopped. Magic trap. A hidden magic trap appeared on the rock wall of the crater. This was an alarm array with a fire attack spell. After observing for a while, Su-Len carefully removed the magic trap and continued to go deeper. Chapter 478. Bang! A black shadow suddenly hit the rock wall beside him. Lava splashed everywhere. Su-Len immediately stopped and looked down. A 4-meter-tall lava elemental had been slammed hard against the rock wall. The lava elemental's body had cracked because of the powerful force. Before the lava elemental could recover, a huge black shadow instantly rushed up. Roar! A dragon roar sounded. Then, the huge dragon's body instantly pounced on the lava elemental that was struggling to get up. Then, the dragon's strong and powerful claws directly smashed the lava elemental to death. Then, it grabbed the elemental core from the lava elemental's body and threw it up casually. The dragon's ferocious mouth instantly closed. The hard elemental core was crushed like a peanut and swallowed into its stomach. After eating this elemental core, the dragon licked its mouth as if it was not satisfied. Its slender tail swept across and sent a lava elemental that had just chased after it flying. Then, the dragon killed another lava elemental and swallowed its elemental core. After eating a few elemental cores in a row, the dragon burped with satisfaction and walked leisurely to the deeper parts of the volcanic crater. Su-Len moved his body and rubbed his ears. The circular terrain of the volcanic crater was like a loudspeaker. The dragon's roar just now reverberated back and forth in the volcanic crater, and the echo shook his eardrums until now. A young red dragon. This is a big harvest. Ruby scales. The color is so beautiful. Looking at the depths of the volcanic crater, Su-Len's eyes flashed. After knowing that this nest was a young red dragon, Su-Len became more cautious. The red dragon was the most powerful of the 5-color dragons. Even among the metal dragons, only the gold dragon could compete with it. Su-Len took a deep breath and moved into the depths of the volcanic crater again. The red dragon's nest was in a cave deep in the volcanic crater. Next to it was boiling lava. The surrounding temperature was very high, and there was only one very narrow path leading to the cave. However, after passing through the last path and entering the cave, the front suddenly opened up. A huge dragon nest appeared in front of him. As soon as Su-Len entered the cave, he felt his eyes light up. A 5-meter-tall gold hill appeared in front of him. Gold often appeared in volcanic lava. Many gold veins were formed after the lava cooled. Su-Len was surprised that the red dragon had so much gold. As a young red dragon, he had more wealth than many adult dragons. It seemed that this volcano often brought out a lot of gold when it erupted. This red dragon had found a good place to live. It was already a rich dragon before it had even reached adulthood. However, now that the red dragon was full, it did not realize that it was being watched. Su-Len looked at the red dragon sleeping on the gold hill. The red dragon's appearance was strong and ferocious. Its ruby-like scales had a layer of muscle outline, and there were sharp bone spurs at its joints. At this time, the red dragon was sleeping very soundly. Some transparent liquid could even be seen flowing down its ferocious jaw. As it breathed, a bubble on its nose contracted back and forth. The red dragon did not react to Su-Len's arrival. Giant dragons would be less alert when they were sleeping, but as soon as they sensed danger or any movement, the sleeping giant dragon would wake up instantly. As a big boss that often appeared in various adventure stories, giant dragons were very popular. When Sulan first came to this world, he often heard some bards telling stories about knights defeating evil dragons. The story was that the evil dragon captured a princess, and the king issued a mission to ask people to save his daughter. Then, a brave knight with the help of a few companions finally defeated the evil dragon and saved the princess. There were many different versions of this story, but Sulan had always been curious. Why did the dragon capture the princess? Wasn't it supposed to rob the treasury? Even if the dragon captured the princess and threatened the king to hand over a sky-high ransom, the king would probably not agree. Therefore, the dragon capturing the princess was a completely false proposition. Wizards had done a lot of research on giant dragons, and Sulan had naturally read these books. They even introduced the fighting attributes of giant dragons at different ages, such as which age was the most dangerous, which kind of giant dragons were friendly to humans, the power of the giant dragon's breath, and so on. In the library of the North Wind Tower, there were hundreds of books about giant dragons, such as Habits of Giant Dragons, Types of Giant Dragons, Overview of Giant Dragons, The Book of Giant Dragons, and so on. The body of a giant dragon was a very precious material. Its scales could be made into armor, its bones could be made into equipment, its meat could be eaten, and its blood could be used for the dragon blood baptism ceremony or to make bloodline potions. The dragon bloodline warlock was the most popular of all warlock schools, and also one of the most powerful warlock professions. Many bards said that after bathing in the dragon's blood, one would gain great power and one's body would become as hard as iron. This saying was actually wrong. Not everyone could bear the dragon's blood. For example, the blood of a red dragon was almost like boiling lava. If an ordinary person bathed in this dragon's blood, they would be directly burned into a pile of charcoal. The correct way was to carry out the dragon blood baptism ceremony. After this ceremony, one could strengthen one's body, immunity, and toughness, and improve one's resistance to diseases and toxins. The dragon blood baptism ceremony could be carried out multiple times. For example, the 5-color dragon could baptize the dragon's blood of all 5 colors once, and this effect could be stacked. If the dragon blood baptism ceremony was carried out to the 5th level and above, one could also gain an additional legendary level ability, Armored Skin. Of course, very few people would do this. After all, it was not easy to slay a dragon, and doing so would arouse the hostility of giant dragons. Sulan had also seen in some wizards' letters that some wizards had carried out the dragon blood baptism ceremony on certain parts of their body in order to gain the achievement of being as hard as iron. It was said that the effect was remarkable. The red dragon had the highest IQ among the 5-color dragons, and at the same time, it was also the strongest. However, in the statistical research conducted by the wizards, it was found that the red dragon's death rate was second only to the white dragon. The white dragon was known as the stupidest giant dragon, and its IQ was only a little higher than that of a wild beast. The main reason was that the red dragon was too arrogant. Most of the other giant dragons would only go out to play when they were young and had the ability to protect themselves. However, the red dragon was different. They would go out to rob villages or adventurers when they were young dragons. This practice was undoubtedly telling others that there were dragons here, and that they should quickly become dragon slayers. Among all the dragons, the red dragon was the most vengeful. They would even hold a grudge for hundreds of years because of something. Then, one day, when they were strong enough, they would suddenly come and destroy everything. The red dragon would use a few years to come up with an attack plan. After discovering the enemy, they would directly attack. In short, they would spend a lot of time to come up with a plan. When the battle started, they would just throw it aside and attack. The red dragon in front of him was sleeping very soundly. Giant dragons that had just eaten would have a good sleep. Sulan carefully moved back and forth in the dragon's cave. Soon, he had set up a binding circle. With a burst of strong magic light, the red dragon in front of him suddenly opened its eyes. Binding circle. Spell maximization. 8 silver rune chains appeared in an instant and directly pinned the red dragon to the ground. The red dragon that had just woken up struggled to get up. Who? Who is sneakily attacking the great lava king? The red dragon roared angrily. Its huge body violently struggled to get rid of the chains. The 8 silver rune chains were pulled out of shape, and the entire cave shook slightly. Soon, it found Sulen standing next to it. The red dragon took a deep breath. Its 2 huge eyes burst into flames, and its chest bulged. In the next second, it was about to spit out a scorching breath. A light flashed on Sulen's body, and a shadow tentacle instantly appeared. It quickly wrapped around the red dragon's ferocious mouth and violently stopped the dragon's breath that it was about to spit out. For a moment, the red dragon's cheeks, which were originally dark red, turned red. Its 2 eyes bulged out, and large amounts of flames came out of its nostrils and mouth. Its entire head was on fire. The red dragon that was forcefully stopped felt very uncomfortable. After a while, this situation disappeared. Plumes of black smoke came out of the red dragon's nostrils, mouth, and ears. The red dragon that had recovered stared at Sulen. Its body began to struggle with all its might, trying to get rid of the chains. The angry red dragon exploded with a shocking amount of power. Sulen was only an advanced wizard, and the binding circle he cast was soon on the verge of collapsing. Seeing this, the red dragon in front of him struggled even harder. It had already decided that once it broke free, it would torture this wizard in front of it. Why bother? Can't you just stay put? Sulen curled his lips as he looked at the red dragon that was struggling violently. Bang! 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 Sulen smiled as he looked at the red dragon in front of him. He didn't care at all that it had broken free. You're quite active, but you still need to be trained to be a mount. Mount? The red dragon was stunned for a moment, and then it became even angrier. Damn human, you want to use me as a mount? Die. The red dragon angrily pounced at Sulen. It's really hard to convince a dragon to be a mount. Sulen shook his head in disappointment and dodged the red dragon's attack. However, when he thought about having a cool red dragon as a mount, Sulen decided to persuade this red dragon. He believed that as long as he was reasonable, this red dragon would agree in the end. Chapter 479. Dragon's Breath. A scorching dragon's breath came out of the red dragon's mouth. The cone-shaped flame covered a large area. A second before the dragon's breath drowned Sulen, a teleportation light flashed from his body. Sulen's figure instantly appeared near the red dragon's head. 5 lightning whips. Sulen flicked his wrist gently, and a lightning whip more than 20 meters long appeared in his hand. Sulen swung it forward, and the 5 lightning whips instantly restrained the red dragon. Lightning crackled continuously, and a large amount of lightning exploded, causing the red dragon to scream in agony. Damn human. I'm going to kill you. The red dragon roared angrily, and the sound seemed to shake the entire cave. Some rocks slid down from the top of the cave. Bullsh *T. Sulen curled his lips and said. Then, he swung hard, and the lightning whips appeared again. They ruthlessly whipped the red dragon's body, and the hard scales on its body were directly shattered. Sulen did not stop. The 5 lightning whips continued to whip the red dragon, and the red dragon screamed in agony. How about it? Think about it. How about becoming my mount? Sulen's hand shook gently, and a lightning whip swayed in his hand. When the red dragon saw the lightning whips, it could not help but tremble. After hearing Sulen's words, it could not help but roar, "You're dreaming. Human. Even if I die, I won't become your mount. Wishful thinking. You'd better give up. How can I, the great Onyx Via, be a human's mount? Unless I'm dead. Why are you so loud?" Sulen rubbed his ears and whipped it. Looks like we're on the same page. Sulen shook his head in disappointment. With a flip of his hand, a long halberd surrounded by countless lightning powers appeared. The red dragon that was dodging the lightning whips froze. Then, it was instantly bound by the 5 lightning whips and could not move. She instantly sensed the dangerous aura of the weapon, and a strong sense of crisis spread from her heart. It seemed that as long as she moved slightly, she would receive a fatal blow. The faintly discernible traces of blood on the weapon gave her a terrifying pressure. When the red dragon saw the human in front of her pick up the storm halberd and was about to attack, Onyxvia panicked. "Looks like there's going to be a red skull ornament on the wall in my study," Sulan said regretfully. Hearing that Suluan was going to hang his head on the wall, the red dragon Onyxvia's face changed. She suddenly said eagerly, "Stop. Stop. Human. Let's talk." The sharp halberd blade stopped below the red dragon's slender neck. The red dragon Onyxvia only felt a slight chill on its neck, and the scales on its body stood up. Sulan heard Onyxvia Onyxu, and said of human, "Can you move that weapon away from me? It's too close. I don't feel comfortable." Onyxvia said as she twisted her body uneasily. "All right, I'll fulfill your request." Sulan put the storm halberd away. "From today onwards, you're my mount. If you refuse, you can move." Sulan waved the storm halberd back and forth in the air at the red dragon. Onyxvia looked at the storm halberd and did not dare to move. "Since you're not moving, I'll take it that you agree." Sulan looked at the motionless red dragon and said happily, "Look, isn't this great? We can still be on the same page. I like this kind of giant dragon who understands the situation. Isn't it just being a mount? It's not a big deal. I'll be very gentle." "All right, since you've agreed, I'll let you go. There's a saying that goes, a wise dragon submits to circumstances. You should learn more about it," Sulan said as he put the storm halberd back into his storage space. Then, he took out a self-created general template from his storage space. "Go to hell." Sulan removed the lightning whip from the red dragon's body. After the storm halberd that made her heart palpitate disappeared, the red dragon Onyxvia was filled with endless anger. She was about to spit out dragon breath, but in the next second, a sharp pain came from her chin. Bang! A huge force came from her chin, and the dragon breath that she was about to spit out was scattered again. The red dragon Onyxvia's head instantly lifted up, and the dragon breath of fire was spat into the air. Before she could react, a huge force pressed her head against the ground and rubbed it back and forth. Her body was also pulled up involuntarily. She then turned around and smashed into the rock wall beside her with a bang. The hard rock wall cracked, and the huge red dragon fell down powerlessly. The red dragon Onyxvia didn't know what had happened at all. In just an instant, she couldn't help but fly up. This was the first time she had encountered this in her dragon life. Even in her inherited memories, such a thing had never happened. A human actually had more strength than her. How was this possible? Not to mention humans, even giants didn't have such strength. Sulan moved his wrist. His strength had reached 50, and a red dragon in its prime only had around 45. Sulan easily flung the red dragon away. After he raised his strength to 50, he hadn't encountered any creature with a higher strength than him. Young dragons don't talk about martial ethics. "Sneak attack," Sulan said to the red dragon in front of him with a smile. He casually used a self-created hero template on the red dragon, and a familiar system notification sounded in his ears. Ding! You have used self-created hero template on the red dragon Onyxvia. Self-created hero activated. Please choose a hero's character trait, talent. Horsemanship, hidden weapon, throwing, sword skills, spear skills, archery skills, charm, ferocity, regeneration, calm, elemental affinity, chi return, might, choose might. Might, the target has a strong aura, causing a strong sense of oppression to the surrounding enemies. There is a certain chance of forcing the enemy to escape or surrender. Detected that the target has the Draconic Aura talent. Might Aura talent has been upgraded to Advanced Draconic Aura. Please choose a skill. Soaring Dragon. Selection complete. Hero template generated. A light flashed, and the red dragon Onyx Via became one of Sullen's heroes. Slap. Sulen slapped the red dragon Onyx Via's head. Stop pretending to be dead. Get up. We're going home. The red dragon Onyx Via got up from the ground with a hopeless expression. Suluan was very satisfied with this red dragon. After circling around the red dragon, the more he looked at it, the more he felt it was mighty. If he rode this big guy out, the rate of turning heads was absolutely 100%. It was better than any other mount. The red dragon was the strongest among the color dragons. They were selfish, arrogant, and liked to hold grudges. Many evil dragons in stories were based on the red dragon's template. They were greedy and had an endless greed for treasures. Basically, every red dragon could be said to be a destroyer. However, this was not a problem for Sulen. Training was something that Sulen loved the most. As for how to train a red dragon, Suluan was ready to make a complete plan in his mind. He believed that he would be able to train a well-behaved red dragon. Besides, red dragons were very eye-catching. Raising such a red dragon was a symbol of strength. In the dragon's nest, Suluan packed up the gold in front of him and put them into his storage space. At the same time, he explained to the crestfallen red dragon next to him, "Don't worry, these gold are still yours. I'm just keeping them for you. Besides, this gold hasn't been fully smelted. It's full of impurities. I'll help you smelt it again after I bring it back. Of course, you'll have to pay a small fee. By the way, you know transformation, right? Turn into a human first. Your body is too big. I'm not used to looking up to talk to people," Sulen said as he put the gold into his storage space. Although Red Dragon Onyx Via was very reluctant, she could not disobey Sullen's orders. With a flash of light, the originally huge and ferocious red dragon disappeared and was replaced by a red-haired girl. This red-haired girl was Onyx Via's human form. She had long red hair and a wild look on her face. Her body was very curvy, and her skin was white and smooth like jade. There were some outlines of muscles under her skin. Her facial features had the characteristics of a European and American. She looked very beautiful. She was wearing a fiery red leather coat. Her legs were slender and strong, and her calves were straight. It would be a pity if her legs were not used for riding on a tricycle. Dragons had the ability to transform at will. Not only could they transform into humans, but they could also transform into elves. They could choose to transform into humans. Of course, once this human form was fixed, it would become a spell effect and would not consume any magic power. However, if they wanted to transform into other forms, it would still consume magic power. "You're pretty. Come, smile. Don't cry," Sulen said after putting away all the gold. There was still some yellow metal material on the ground. It was not gold, but brass that was close to the color of gold. "Look, you still have so much brass here. You're cheating," Sulen said bitterly as he pointed at the brass in front of him. "You don't have gold, but you're using brass to make up the numbers. Is there even the most basic trust between humans and dragons? How disappointing. I'm only 96 years old. I'm just a young dragon. I don't have that much wealth. I want to make my gold look more comfortable when I sleep. Can't I?" Onyx Via said, rolling her eyes. Chapter 480. To be honest, although the strength of a young dragon was not bad, there was still a big gap between it and a real powerhouse. The strength of a young dragon was around level 17, and it would not become a legend until it was in its prime. Of course, this was the strength of a dragon after it grew up normally. The strength of some dragons with magical fetishes could not be divided by age at all. Who knew if a young dragon was also a legendary wizard? Although this kind of thing was rare, it did not happen. For example, a white dragon nested in a big glacier. If it was in its normal growth state, the time when a dragon could roam around was at least when it was in its prime. In the young dragon period, 0 to 3 years old, dragons in this period generally lived under the protection of their mother dragons. They needed to eat a lot of food every day and hid in their nest to live. Even the most evil red dragon would not chase them out during the young dragon period. Of course, there were some unlucky young dragons who were thrown into the wild as soon as they were born. The lucky ones hid everywhere, and the unlucky ones directly became a delicious meal in someone else's pot. The survival rate of young dragons without the protection of their parents was very low. Of course, there were also those who survived successfully, such as a silver dragon born in a pot and a young dragon born in a sewer. These young dragons had once received the title of King of the Sewer. It was said that the dragons who had received this title were all proficient in the way of evading and finally became the overlord of a region. For a dragon, learning the way of evading was a very important lesson. However, according to the pride of dragons, more than 90% of them were very repulsed by this lesson. Next was the young dragon period, 4 to 10 years old. The dragons in this period began to learn to hunt independently under the protection of their mother. At the same time, they began to improve their fighting skills, understand the knowledge of the dragon inheritance, and improve their knowledge. Of course, they also had to face the competition of their siblings. This was especially fierce among the evil dragons. Snatching food and bullying other siblings were basic skills. During the young dragon period, 11 to 25 years old, the dragons in this period had some self-protection ability. For the metal dragons, their parents would give them some guidance, and then these young dragons would be chased out of the house. Of course, they would allow the young dragons to continue to hunt and live in their territory. As for the evil dragons, they would not be treated so well. They would be chased out of the house by their parents one day, and then they would start to hide everywhere. Some dragons would also work together with their siblings to survive. Dragons in this period would be very careful. It wasn't until the young dragons, 26 to 50 years old, that they truly possessed some strength. At this time, there were very few creatures in the wild that could pose a threat to them. When they entered the young dragon age, 51 to 100 years old, the dragons finally had some of the elegance of the dragons. The kings of the underground sewers, who used to hide everywhere in the past, could finally occupy their own territories and become kings. They didn't have to live in fear all the time. The dragons of this era would recruit some goblins, kobolds, and other monsters to serve them. Onyx Vaya was now 96 years old, and there were still 4 years before the dragon reached adulthood. After leaving the dragon's den, she wandered in the fire elemental plane and finally found a safe place with gold and food. However, she didn't expect to be caught by Sulen. Not only was her gold confiscated, but she also became his mount. Sob, 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 it's too hard for me. After 100 years, the dragon would enter adulthood after a long slumber. The adult dragon would then be able to roam around. For example, robbing someone for no reason. Kidnapping a princess. Robbing a city, these were all basic skills. Of course, after the dragons reached 200 years old, they would enter adulthood and become more powerful. After that, the dragons would enter old age. At this time, the dragons would try to avoid head-on combat. More often, they would let their followers fight or use spells to fight. For the dragons to truly shake the continent and become like the wings of frost, the bane of the north, the wings of death, the scarlet bane, and other dragons that made the entire material world tremble, they would have to enter the ancient dragon age. The dragons of this age, as long as they were still alive, were extremely difficult to deal with. The long years had allowed them to master a lot of knowledge and become cunning at the same time. At this time, even legendary wizards would have to take a detour if they encountered an ancient dragon. As for the ancient dragons, they rarely existed in the material world. Onyx Vaya watched Sulen take away all her treasures and she became his mount. Her heart was full of grievances. She comforted herself again and again. Being caught now was nothing. When she became stronger in the future, she would definitely teach this man a lesson. Oh right, she also needed to practice the flame whip. When the time came, she would hang him up and whip him every day. Slap. Just as Onyx Vaya was fantasizing about how she would whip Sulen in the future, she was suddenly slapped awake from her beautiful dream. Who dares to slap the great lava king? I did it. Sulan looked at her expressionlessly and said. What are you thinking? Didn't you hear what I just said? I heard it. Onyxvia said guiltily when she saw Sulan's expressionless handsome face. If you heard it, then restrain your energy. I'm going to activate the plane teleportation. If there's a problem, I can't guarantee that you won't be torn in half by the power of the dimension. Onyxvia retracted her energy, then Sulan activated the teleportation beacon on his body. A teleportation light rose and instantly covered the two of them. In the next second, their figures disappeared from the fire elemental plane. A teleportation light descended from the sky, and Sulan and Onyxvia appeared on the astrology platform. Welcome back. You've worked hard. Hathaway smiled at Sulan. It's okay. How are the two lava elementals? Sulan moved his body, and the dizziness from the teleportation quickly disappeared. They've been sent to the secret realm, Hathaway said. She then looked at Onyxvia and asked, Did you bring this back? Sulan looked at Onyxvia and said, My new mount, a red dragon. What do you think? Isn't it cool? Red dragon? Hathaway looked at the red-haired girl in front of her in surprise. This was a red dragon. This beautiful girl with a heroic spirit in front of her was a red dragon? Hathaway, who saw a dragon for the first time, couldn't help but widen her eyes and size up Onyxvia. A living dragon. She was indeed much prettier than the dragons in books. Can you transform into a dragon and let me see? By the way, you're not an adult yet. After learning that Onyxvia was a dragon, Hathaway immediately pounced on her excitedly. She circled around the red dragon and kept gesturing at her. Do you have any extra scales? Give me a few to study. Also, you have so much blood on you. Let me draw some of it. Are you like a human now? It should be okay for me to pinch you. Hathaway stared at Onyxvia with glowing eyes. The little red dragon, who had just arrived at the wizard tower, only felt panic in her heart. When she felt the shocking elemental energy fluctuation in Hathaway's body, she was so scared that she didn't dare to move. However, this woman in front of me is so scary. She actually wants to pull out my scales and draw my blood. Master won't leave me alone, right? I want to go home, sob sob sob. Looking at Hathaway's posture, Sulan shook his head helplessly and pulled her aside. All right, Hathaway, you're scaring her. Onyxvia just arrived and hasn't familiarized herself with the environment. These things can wait until you're familiar with them. Familiar? I don't want to know her. I don't want to be familiar with her. So scary. Onyxvia shouted in her heart, but she didn't dare to open her mouth. She wanted to escape, but her body was bound by the contract. She could only stand there, feeling wronged. Okay. Hearing Sulan's words, Hathaway thought for a moment and agreed. It was indeed not good to touch her for the first time, but it would be fine when they were familiar with each other. Anyway, such a big dragon couldn't run away. Let me introduce you. This is Onyxvia, a young red dragon, my mount. Sulan said proudly. This is Hathaway, one of the masters of this wizard tower, a legendary wizard. This is Chrissy, the head servant of the succubus. The other two are the queen of the winged people, Alex and Phyllis. They are not here for the time being. I'll introduce them to you later. Sulan introduced several people and said, I'll give you access to the wizard tower. You can come here in the future. Of course, some places are not allowed to enter, such as the library and the seclusion room. You can use these. If you have nothing to do, you can read more books. Don't always think about relying on your talent to make a living. Learning more spells is good for you. Sulan said lightly. Okay, I'll go arrange a place for you to stay first. Sulan brought Onyxvia to the warehouse of the wizard tower. As soon as she entered the warehouse, the little red dragon's eyes immediately became sparkling stars behind her. Countless golden lights dazzled her eyes. A gold mountain, a real gold mountain. More than 80% of the gold of the entire northern city was stored here. In addition to the gold, there was also a pile of magic gems next to it. The whole treasury was shining with golden light. This. So much gold. The little red dragon stared at the gold mountain in front of her, dumbfounded. Then, she jumped up excitedly and plunged into the gold mountain. After a few seconds, she came out on the other side of the gold mountain. Then, she grabbed the gold with both hands and swam in the gold mountain. Sulan didn't care about her. Instead, he put the gold in his storage space into the treasury first. Looks like you're very satisfied with your new home. Then you can live here from now on. Remember, without my permission, you can't leave anything behind. Otherwise, he. As he spoke, Sulan looked back and forth at the little red dragon. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.